Heavenly Father, today we put on the full armor to protect us against attack. We put on the belt of truth to protect against lies and deception. We put on the breastplate of righteousness to protect our hearts from the temptations. We put the gospel of peace on our feet to walk in your light, peace, and freedom with the Holy Spirit. We rebuke anxious thoughts. We take up your shield of faith for protection to block and destroy all the darts and threats thrown at us by the enemy. We put on the helmet of salvation to cover our minds and thoughts, reminding us that we are children of a mighty King. We are forgiven, set free, saved by the blood of Jesus. We take up the sword of the Spirit, your living word, that has the power to demolish strongholds and is sharper than any double-edged sword. We come to you, Lord, in prayer daily. In Jesus' mighty name we pray. Amen. What's up, you guys? Welcome to The Imagination. I'm your host, Emma, and today you are going to hear an important story brought to you by 3 MKUltra survivors who are bravely and courageously stepping up to tell us the harrowing childhood stories they have in common regarding Stanford Research Institute. Introducing Stanford Research Institute mind-controlled experiment survivors, Frida, Ariadne, and Marc Victor. And we're also going to be talking today with Marc's amazing partner, Marina Low, who is here for support. I always say support systems, whether it's in a partner or a friend, are always the unsung heroes of a survivor's healing journey. So we're honored to have Marina here as well. Taking a few quotes off Wikipedia regarding SRI, which we are going to be referring to you today when we talk about Stanford Research Institute for the most part. I'm going to read you guys some direct quotes. Stanford Research Institute is an American nonprofit research institute and organization headquarters in Menlo Park, California. The trustees of Stanford University established SRI in 1946 as a center of innovation to support economic development in the region. The organization was founded as the Stanford Research Institute. SRI formally separated from Stanford University in 1970 and became known as SRI International in 1977. SRI performs client-sponsored research and development for government agencies, commercial businesses, and private foundations. Herbert Hoover, then a trustee of Stanford University, was also an early proponent of an institute, but became less involved with the project after he was elected president of the United States. In April 1953, Walt and Roy Disney hired SRI, and in particular Harrison Price, to consult on their proposal for establishing an amusement park in Burbank, California. SRI provided information on location, attendance patterns, and economic feasibility. SRI selected a larger site in Anaheim, prepared reports about operation, and provided on-site administrative support for Disneyland and acted in an advisory role as the park expanded. As a belated response to Vietnam War protesters who believed that funding from the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, aka DARPA, made the university part of a military-industrial complex, the Stanford Research Institute spilt from Stanford University in 1970. The organization subsequently changed its name from the Stanford Research Institute to SRI International in 1977. In 1972, physicists Harold E. Puthoff and Russell Targ undertook a series of investigations of psychic phenomena sponsored by the CIA, for which they coined the term remote viewing. In 1986, SRI.com became the 8th registered .com domain. In December 2007, SRI launched a spin-off company, Siri Inc., which Apple acquired in April 2010. In October 2011, Apple announced the Siri personal assistant as an integrated feature on the Apple iPhone 4S. Siri's technology was born from SRI's work on the DARPA-funded CALO project. CALO? I don't know exactly how that's said, but CALO project, described by SRI as the largest artificial intelligence project ever launched. Siri was co-founded in December 2007. These are a few quotes from Wikipedia. However, what Wikipedia will never tell us about SRI are the horrific MKUltra mind control experiments that were going on behind the scenes from 1953 until 1969 at the hands of people that you'll recognize, including Dr. Green himself, aka Joseph Mengele, on innocent children. We are about to change that today as 3 amazing survivors come forward to share their stories with you. This is important because we often forget the vastness of where these experiments were allowed to happen. There have been many survivors on this podcast who allege horrific abuses that happen to them within academic institutions. And we know also that secret scouting societies, such as the Skull and Bones, exist within many highly reputable Ivy League universities. For the sake of our own discernment and for the safety of our children and youth, we need to be brave enough to lift the veil off whatever is elevated in society and look beyond what is obvious until we come to a place of truth. And today, Frida, Marc, Marina, and Ariadne are here to lift the veil with us and for us. I ask that you grab a pen and paper, take lots of notes, and give these incredible humans your full attention. What you're about to hear, you won't hear in any mainstream publication, and even online, it's very hard to find information surrounding MKUltra and SRI. As former survivor and podcast guest Molly Skye Brown would say, the meek speak and we are reporting for duty. Before I finish introducing this week's guest, I just want to give you guys a reminder that if you're a survivor whistleblower and you want to share your story or share any information with me, you can email me at imagineabetterworld2020@gmail.com. Send me a briefing of who you are and how I can support you, whether it's through podcasting or sharing information. I also recently started a Substack, and you can find that at www.emmacatherine.substack.com. I've been doing weekly recaps and insights on my podcast and using this as a place to publicly journal my journey as an advocate for our children. My Rumble channel is also up and running, and I'd love your support on that platform as well. All my social, email, and project links can be found in the show notes. And as always, I'm so grateful for all the love you guys show this channel and the amazing guests featured. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please help me in welcoming this week's guest panel of honor, SRI survivors and whistleblowers, Frida, Marc, Marina, and Ariadne. Thank you all so much for being here with me today.
Thank you, Emma.
Absolutely, it's an honor, and thank you, Frida, for setting this up. I want to preface this. We said this before we logged on. How amazing that there is 3 of you that found each other and are here today. That is really unheard of in these programs, that people end up connecting with others who were in with them, whether it was in passing or that they knew directly. And I think it's just amazing that you guys can all be here today, supporting each other and corroborating each other's stories and just helping people understand this program, and where it took place and the history behind it and your experiences. So I thought we'd start with all of you giving a little bit of background information on yourselves as individuals, and then we'll come together as a team and really start breaking down, SRI and your memories from it, what the program was there for, and just start diving into the hidden history that we're not told. So why don't we start with you, Ariadne? What did your parents do? What was your family life like as, a newborn, maybe before you were born? And what were the events that happened in your life that led up to you being put into this program, whether it was a family affiliation, friend, acquaintance, or just some sort of a, deception on your family of how you got in? I'd love for you to share, and then maybe we'll just go through and all of you can share a little bit about your background.
Okay. Actually, you know what? I don't want to go first.
Okay.
I changed my mind.
All right. Who wants to go first? Marc? Frida?
I'll go
Frida.
first.
Okay, go ahead, Frida.
So I was born into a multi-generational incest-based family. And these are the type of families that the CIA wants to use. That's what they were looking for. I believe that my father was actually brought into the MKUltra programming during the Korean War, because I did research on that. So he went into the army at the end of the World War II. And so he was stationed in Korea for 2 years. I believe that's when he was first exposed to MKUltra there. And then my mother, she was part of the whole Hollywood scene during the early 1950s, late 1940s, early 1950s. So I know that there was a lot of MKUltra going on in Hollywood. So I think they were both exposed to it. I don't know what the extent was, but it is very common for the CIA to put the parents under mind control so they can access the children better. So anyways, Both of my parents attended San Jose State University in the early 1950s, and my father graduated from there. I believe that they were recruited off. Okay, so near San Jose State University, there is the Order of Rosicrucians, which is a main branch of the Illuminati, which the Illuminati is a collection of secret societies, okay, that do like, but it's not a secret anymore because we've had too many people come out of these so-called secret societies and kind of spill their secrets. So I believe they were recruited off the San Jose State University campus. They joined the Rosicrucian, Order of Rosicrucians, which is located, they have a main chapter right there in San Jose. And so that's how they got involved with that. And they all these secret societies are involved with mind control. So when my twin sister Claire and I were born, and her name is Claire Mix, by the way, Claire Mix, and I'll give you my maiden name, Frida Campadonica. So that's the name that we were born with, but she changed her name because she was involved in art and music and she wanted a different last name. So she actually adopted my mother's maiden name. So Claire and I were born at Stanford Hospital in 1961. And I believe that Joseph Mengele was there because he actually joined the staff at Stanford Research Institute in 1960. And then we were born like in early 1961. He was looking for twins to work with or experiment on. And so when we were born, I think somebody, must have called my parents at some point, but asked them if they would be interested in letting Stanford use their twin girls, that would be Frida and Claire, to be used in what they termed behavioral modification research that was being done at Stanford Research Institute, but it was actually the CIA mind control programs, MK Ultra. So my parents actually got paid for letting us stay at SRI for about 6 months out of each year. And what happened to us there, was really horrific, but that's how we were brought into the program.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. And then
Sure.
Marina, I know that you weren't a survivor of SRI, but do you maybe just want to introduce yourself and maybe how you met Mark?
Well, she's indirectly a survivor of SRI.
Secondary PTSD is a thing.
You can pick up second-time PTSD.
Yeah, like I said, the spouses are unsung heroes. It's amazing that you've stood by him through this. So I'd love for you to tell a little bit about who you are, and Mark can corroborate to you, but go ahead and introduce yourself.
Okay, I'm Marina Low. I am actually South African. I live in South Africa. I met Mark on a dating site, online dating site. A friend of mine put me on there, and his living partner, who was really ill and dying of cancer, put him on that thing. And somehow, how these things go, we got acquainted and started talking. And in the beginning, he told me from the beginning what happened to him. And I was looking at this and I thought, what the hell is this? I Googled it and I thought, oh my God, what the hell is this? And then I thought, okay, let me listen it out a little bit and see what this guy is telling me, how this crazy stories. And then I started to realize, but there is a lot more to this. And as I got to know Mark, and I come to America as often as I can for 6 months at a time. So, because that's what my visa allows, a tourist visa. So living with somebody like Mark, you start to realize that there is absolutely nothing unrealistic or untrue, or I'm struggling to find the word here, but there's no way you lie about these things. You are not capable, because it comes out in all the little detail. You know, in dreams they dream, or things that set them off, panic disorder kind of thing. You know what? You know, it is.
So something
Yeah.
as little as a 200-pound skinny guy picking up a 350-pound refrigerator that's somewhat not normal.
Yeah, he had his hand surgery. I had surgery on his hand, and he said, "Oh, we must move the refrigerator out on the deck to another place." And then he came back and he said, "Oh, I moved it." And I said, "But how?" And he said, "Oh, with my legs." And I said, "But I want to see." It's
So
like,
so I picked the refrigerator up and showed her.
yeah, it's like somebody else, you know. It's weird. It's really the weird little things that tells you the story.
I mean, something as simple as somebody that can throw saw blades, you know, faster than a quick draw guy, and hit a dime from 150 feet away. Somebody that can do the same thing while he's diving and doing somersaults, and somebody that's 68 years old and had over 100 surgeries and can throw somebody like a frisbee.
Yeah, or you know, you would, even when he's really sick, because his health is really not good.
Tell him about the hypnotist when I was.
Yeah, like he saw a hypnotist when he was a cyclist. So they hypnotized him to feel no pain when he listens to music.
And cycle and turn the crank to the beat of the music, I'll feel no pain.
Yeah. So when he's really, even if he's really sick and all this, he would get on a Stairmaster.
And do it for 2 or 3 hours.
Yeah, so with music, he will be on that thing for 2-3 hours and he doesn't get tired. He can go on even more, but I tell him to get the hell off because it's insane. He just doesn't get tired. I can hear him laughing. He enjoys it. Ha ha ha, while he's, you know, going on. And I think, what the hell?
What the hypnotist should have done was make sure that it took away the emotional pain.
Oh yeah, it just takes away the physical pain, not the emotional pain. I think that's impossible, but that's my short story. I know you need to get to Ariadne because she doesn't have time.
Yeah, do you want to introduce yourself, Ariadne, and then we'll come back to you, Mark?
Yeah.
Sure, yeah.
Very good.
So I was born in Santa Monica, California. My dad worked in Hollywood. We moved about 20 times the first 10 years of my life, and then about once a year after that. He did eventually settle down in the Midwest. We did live at Stanford both in the spring of 1962 and also the whole school year of 1966 to 67. We lived in Stanford Village. I believe he was a graduate student in creative writing. And it was actually my deceased brother who mentioned to me at some point 10 or 15 years ago that Stanford Research Institute was right on the other side of our backyard. I figured out that I'm a survivor pretty slowly. I think the first breakthrough was actually the same month that the Berlin Wall came down, and I had signed up for rebirthing for the reason that I had been working in a strip club for several years. And in spite of coming from a very well-educated family, university, you know, my dad was a college professor, I was unable to stop working in the strip club, and I had gone into a pretty severe depression, which lasted for several years. And I started hearing other women talk about being survivors of sexual abuse, but I couldn't remember anything. But I've always remembered my past lives. I've always been very psychic, and I decided that if I could remember my past lives, I could certainly remember whatever happened to me in this life. So I set out on a quest to remember it, and I initially signed up for rebirthing, which is an old yogic technique, which has to do with breathing. And it does bring stuff up, but the stuff that it brought up right away was so horrifying to me that I basically decided that it wasn't real. I basically decided that I was psychotic. I didn't decide that right away, but I did decide that pretty quickly because I just couldn't deal with the information. At the same time, I started seeing stuff on television, which kind of echoed some of the information I had seen. And I stopped. So my solution was to stop watching television. And then around that time, I got pregnant, and I didn't want my unborn child to be listening to this kind of stuff. So I kind of put my head in the sand for about 13 years until my son was actually not a child anymore, till he was 13. And at that point, I was having a conversation with my best friend, whom I originally met at the Conference of Association for Past Life Research and Therapy. And I've always had access to a lot of past life information my whole life, more than anyone I've ever met. And she started showing me books by survivors of MK Ultra. And at the point when she showed me, there was a line drawing that someone had done of a particular experience, which was very unique. And it was something I had remembered and spoken to my therapist about, but I had decided that I was crazy because clearly no one would ever actually do that to another human being. However, when I was confronted with the evidence in the drawing in front of me, I realized that it was real. So then I kind of said, that was in 2006. And then I decided to interview my mother and ask her about I call them the crew, because although we moved once or twice a year, there was a certain crew of 4 people who kept signing up as dad's students in every new place we went. And so I decided to ask my mother who they were and how dad met them and why they were always there. Okay. And some of them had different identities, different names, different families, but they were the same person, right? So I just kept investigating and researching, and I kind of became a espionage nerd and started reading every book written by John le Carré, and kind of slowly figured out that things were not what they seem. It's from a Broadway musical, which we used to listen to a lot of. Things are seldom what they seem. Skim milk masquerades as cream. Anyway, so, and then I decided I was going to write it down. And to this date, my main motivation is I just want to figure out what the hell happened to me. Okay. And I've made a lot of progress. I decided I was just going to write about the conversation that I had with my mom, which took about 5 days. And she did give me a hell of a lot of information. And then I just decided that I was just going to write down what she said and what I said and what I remembered about those guys and what I remembered about, my abuse, which I also remembered quite a lot about it.
Can you say that saying again? That saying that you said about the cream again?
Things are seldom what they seem. Skim milk masquerades as cream. I'll think of the musical that's from a little bit later.
Your brother said that to me when he was bawling.
When he was what?
Bawling.
He was crying?
Yeah.
Tell me more. I want to know more about my brother.
You go on with the story. It's a bit overwhelmed.
Okay.
He will tell you.
I think I'm almost done with my little intro here. So basically it took me about 17 years to write down a conversation that I had with my mom that took 5 days. And I kind of just finished, a first draft a few months ago. And I sent a copy to my friend Ann Diamond, who wrote a book, My Cold War, whom I actually met online. I had read her book. Hers was one of the books that my friend had given me in 2006. And then at a certain point, I had to get a hold of my psychiatric medication. So I was on a forum for doing that. And that's where I met her. And we started chatting. And I sent her like a draft of 100 or so pages. And then she asked me if I knew Frida. And she told me that Frida, I figured out pretty quickly that Frida had been at Stanford Research Institute the same years, both years actually, that we lived in Stanford Village, which was married student housing for Stanford University. So then I started chatting with Frida. And that was just recently, a couple months ago. And I had to have cataract surgery, and I was just terrified to have cataract surgery because I've always had some pretty bad medical phobias for obvious reasons. And Frida was kind enough to come help me and sit with me during my cataract surgery. And honestly, I don't think I could have done it otherwise. And I'm very happy she did, because now I can see perfectly.
Yay.
So I guess that's enough for now, right? Okay.
Yeah, what a relief.
Were you able to put together at all, Ariadne, how you got into the program? Do you know if it was through your
Yes, I remember. I have a very clear memory when I was 3.5. Mark was talking about those front organizations a minute ago. So there was a it was called Emerson College, actually. It was in Pacific Grove, California. And my father was offered a job there, ostensibly. But when he got there, well, I don't want to go on for too long about that, so I'll just try to sum it up. When he wrote his brother, he said, it didn't work out because supposedly they had no housing, because supposedly he had 3 kids. So they didn't have housing for someone with 3 kids. He said, however, but I wrote to the guy before I left, and he asked for the names and ages of my 3 kids. So why are they telling me that they don't have housing because they have 3 kids? That doesn't make any sense. I mean, that's what he wrote to his older brother. Okay, there was a lot more to that story, which I have uncovered, but I do recall. And this was kind of the main breakthrough, because the way I remembered it, we moved to Pacific Grove. I already knew that there was a difference between living in an apartment and a motel, right? Because we'd been in both, and I helped mommy unpack the dishes out of the cardboard boxes, okay? And put them in the cupboards. And then the next morning that I was in that apartment, the dishes were all packed up again, and the cardboard boxes were all sealed. So I started asking my parents about that, and I didn't get an answer until 2006. And when I finally got an answer from my mother, she said, I'm kind of shortening this story a little bit. She said, we lived in Pacific Grove for 2 weeks, and the only thing I can remember is that I had a splitting headache the entire time. So when she said that, I realized that I had been separated from my mother for 2 weeks. And other things, which I never really forgot, came into she said something about an old schoolhouse, Dad working in an old schoolhouse. And when she said that, I remembered it. And it wasn't like I ever forgot it. I just didn't, ever nobody referred to it before. She mentioned the old schoolhouse, and I remembered walking down the hallway with the offices, with the guys sitting at typewriters, wearing white shirts and ties, and typing. And at the end of the hallway, there was this room, and there was a circle of folding chairs, and there was all these guys sitting around wearing military uniforms, okay? And my dad was a pacifist, conscientious objector, anti-war activist, beatnik, drama professor, okay? And I'm sitting there with my dad and all these guys, and there's this conversation that goes on and on and on and on and on and on. And I'm 3 years old, and I'm sitting there fidgeting, and Dad's kind of shushing me, telling me to stop fidgeting. And he doesn't say anything. He just listens for like half an hour, and finally he says 3 words. And I've never forgotten it, because it was the first time I ever heard the word. He says, "This is blackmail." And I walked down, we all got up, we walked down the hall, he held my hand. I said, "Daddy, what's blackmail?" And he didn't answer me. He looked straight ahead. And we walked outside, and the sun was very bright. And we walked down the hallway. I looked at the guys at the typewriters, and we walked out in the sun, and everything went black, and I was gone. Somebody put a hood over my head. And then it was 2 weeks or a month later that I was back in the apartment in Pacific Grove, and my brother walked by and said, "Where'd you come from?" So I was 3, he was 5. But it took, anyway, that was kind of the main pivotal memory. And I kind of just processed through it during the pandemic, because I got involved with a peer support group of developmental trauma survivors. And I also went and looked at my dad's archive because he has an archive. And I looked at what he said about, that job and why it didn't work out. And Emerson College, I think, has an archive. I think it's at Berkeley. I'm not sure. It only lasted a couple of years. It wasn't really a college. It was a front.
It worked in association with UCLA, who was doing some work for MK Ultra.
Well, my dad met my mom at UCLA.
Well, there's odd connections in associations and business deals between the two that create a hinky thing, but there's no direct evidence.
Right.
That screams, but there's anecdotal stuff. That's completely odd because a normal college makes relationships and associations with all universities so their students actually have choices rather than just one university.
So right after Pacific Grove, we went to Stanford. Dad went to Stanford right after.
And so it was through family that you ended up being put into the program.
Yeah, I believe my dad was coerced into handing me over. But I also think that my father probably got involved in some kind of secret work in World War II because he was a conscientious objector. And he was also extremely brilliant. He had a very high IQ. He had a photographic memory. And I think it's more likely than not that he got recruited.
Would you be surprised there was another doctor, professor that had a similar background to your father? And it'll tell you why your father did what he did. His name was Dr. Olson. Who decided to supposedly fly out a window of New York City and
Frank
land
Olson.
twice as far as he could actually have jumped.
Frank Olson.
So Frank Olson tried to get out of MK Ultra. Frank Olson was involved directly with the chemical bombs that we were dropping on North Korea during the Korean War. And that's what emotionally devastated him to the point where when they started drugging him, he realized the implications of MK Ultra and tried to get out. And in those days, the way you get out is to fly out of a building. That's why your father was stuck.
That's right. Yeah.
See, here's one of the scariest things is most of the documentation that we can find online from Freedom of Information Act is this one document stands out. It's Stanford complaining that they're going through so many employees. For Stanford, the employees were quitting because they had to torture people.
Children.
And then in the bottom half of this letter, it said, oh, by the way, when's our next payment coming? So you can see where Stanford's moral compass started and ended.
And Mark, why don't you share some of your story? Talk about your background, your family, and to the point where how you got into this program.
Well, in October 7th, I'll be grossly specific. On October 17th, 1956, my brother's birthday, I made the mistake of being a better athlete than my brother, and we were racing up the slide and down the slide on my brother's birthday. I got on the top and waved to my mom and dad who were at the trailer right over there. And my brother pushed me off out of jealousy. I landed on my head, had a massive skull fracture, had a brain injury, ended up spending over a year in the hospital, starting out at Orange County Hospital. And quickly, because of Sub-Project 54, I was forced into because, the intelligence department of the government, specifically the Navy originally, was running Sub-Project 54. We were looking for a child with a brain injury And that brain injury would give them, they thought, an inside connection to get into the subconscious and conscious of a human being. So that was important because they had already developed and perfected a way of doing that to an adult. But the problem is that adults, amazingly enough, through growing up, create varying degrees of a defense mechanism to somebody tapping into their subconscious. And they found out that children don't have that developed defense mechanism, and somebody that's giving them a portal into their brain is an unfair advantage. So I was quickly transferred from Orange County, California hospital, and within days transferred to Stanford Hospital. And a week after I showed up there and was treated for a brain injury, I started being tortured, being given LSD and electroshocks. And to the naive, the reason why the LSD is it puts you in a hallucinogenic state, which is interconnecting the conscious and the subconscious. That's the reason why you see things, when you're on acid. That's the reason why things move, is depth and distortions are being manipulated. So what they found is that they could break your conscience and have an access into the subconscious with electroshock, because it would open up that connection and gave them somehow or another the ability of using an invention of the CIA, subliminal programming, the way of, for instance, subliminal programming is famous for being the static on our television sets, but it actually really was. One of the things that's in my writings and in my television show and in my feature film is this scene of me walking into this room where there's around 20 wall-mounted Varian Brothers and Hewlett-Packard equipment. The equipment that was the first EKG machines. So picture 15, 16 kids with 100 or so wires coming out of their leather helmets and bundled together and are going to their separate little machines. All the kids are sitting there, sitting on the front of their seat, captivated with the television as if it was the best cartoon in the history of mankind. And there was static on the TV. And what was happening is the CIA did their first experiment with subliminal programming in the early 50s. And they did it at a movie theater. And in those days, they would play 2 feature films that quickly changed into, they'd have the refreshment break in between the 1 feature film. But in those days, it was in between the 2 feature films, they'd have the refreshment break. During the commercials, they put underneath the commercials that the people desperately needed to buy some pop and candy and popcorn. The movie theater, this is on the prototype. The movie theater sold over 1,500 times the amount of refreshments that time than they ever had. And that was just the prototype. Just imagine how they've developed that. Now, people say in the 60s that, CBS was using it and it was banned and all this other stuff. That's a bunch of bullshit. Subliminal programming, the cliche that you go to the store to buy one thing and you leave with 40 things? The cliche that you go to the clothing store and you go to buy a bra and you end up with, $300 worth of clothing? It's because the subliminal programming is playing underneath their music.
Oh, goodness.
And it's openly accepted, even though it's the definition of manipulative. And that's how I've gone to a martial arts class. How in the hell do you learn martial arts through subliminal programming? I would show up at a martial arts class, and you want to enrage a teacher or a sensei? Show up and say you have no experience, and then all of a sudden outdo everybody in the class. In that sensei's mind, you've just lied to them. You've disrespected them profoundly. Now they're pissed at you. I've gone to a behavioral profiling class at UCLA, and the professor was enraged. He says, nobody has ever got 100% on my test. To hell with you, Mr. Victor. And he was going off on me. Mary Jo tried to settle him down and said, hey, just blah, 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 blah. You know, and teachers don't like it when you show up and pretend like you don't have any knowledge. And I'm sure it's happened to a lot of you. You take a class and it feels like you already know something there. It's things you shouldn't know. You shouldn't know how to do different martial arts moves if you've never done them before. It doesn't make correlative sense. It takes time to learn French. It takes time to learn differential equations. You have to know calculus like it's the Bible. There's stepping stones of knowledge, so you don't jump steps. So the only way that happens, and I need to understand, how in the heck do you teach somebody something physical where the motion to block a punch, that's something you actively have to know how to time it, because it's nice to block the punch after the guy knocks your ass out, maybe not. So how do you learn a physical thing through subliminal programming? It just astounds me.
Wow. And so, Mark, was it your parents, or who was it? I know that you got put in for an injury. Were your parents aware that you were going through that, or was that?
Well, what happened was that initially my I would come home, and you can tell I'm not lacking for words. So I'd come home with my mother from Stanford Research Institute and be telling her everything that that happened to me. Now, she's got a big problem there, because I'm not going to hold back and tell everybody. So she's got to put a squash to that to get nobody to believe me. This is how I was introduced. This is Mark. This is our little liar. When your mother introduces you as the little liar, oh my gosh, nobody's going to believe shit what you say now, are they? And why is that? Because my mother was a lesbian who got out of the Navy doing top secret work, once again, just like my father. And she got out of the Navy because the military made it available, because they wanted to get women out of the military after World War II and Korea. So they made it available, so if you got pregnant, you could get out of the Navy or the Army or whatever. So my mother got pregnant. A Jewish liberal Jew got pregnant by a atheist. Picture my mother's family on that one.
She wants to know your story.
And that's in essence how we ended up in Orange County, California, with Richard Victor working for Lockheed and my mother working as a flight tower operator, primarily doing top secret missions. So both of them were in black projects. My mother was caught in a lesbian party and blackmailed. It was the program in the CIA. It was called Midnight Climax. They say it was primarily a run out of a couple different houses in San Francisco and one house in New York City, but that's not true. It's not hard to plan a party anywhere, especially when you already own Brookdale Lodge in the Santa Cruz Mountains, and the person you're trying to blackmail is a waitress there. So my mother was blackmailed. My mother was blackmailed before my father confronted Stanford with, what in the hell are you doing to my son? I was such a great athlete that my father was living his childhood inabilities of being a great athlete. He was living them through me. So he wanted to know, what in the hell are you doing to my prodigy son? And a week later, in those days, the equivalent of one circuit board in our computer was the equivalent of about 4 or 5 railroad cars full of vacuum tubes. So vacuum tubes are everywhere when you're a scientist developing rocketry. So my father was pushed head first. And most of the people my father worked with were the German rocket scientists that were brought over after World War II, and there were the Operation Paperclip rocket scientists. One of them pushed him headfirst into a vacuum circuit board. He had 100,000 volts go through his head. He somehow or another survived. And when he recovered, the CIA told him that he better flee or he'll be dead. He fled. We never saw him again. He left a 6-month-old daughter, a 20-month-old son, a 3.5-year-old son, and a 5.5-year-old son, and left them with nothing and fled for his own life like a coward. And he told me later on that he would have been dead within days if he hadn't. And that's partially how I got involved with MK Ultra, against my will. And I fought him like a son of a bitch the entire way, because I was taught as a proud Jew that, you know, you don't talk about injustice, you stand up. And moral compass stories were told to me on the way home from Stanford, that a boy cried because he had no shoes until he saw a boy that had no feet. And contradictions in reality, doing what's right, more often than not, it's going to cost you, but you still have to stand up against it. The trilogy of my films I stole from my mother's saying and stole the up against it, because it's important to honor where you got things from and honor the frailty of human beings, and have dialogue and be proud of being a liberal Jew or a liberal, and not have the problem talking to the other party. And the other party can't be just so dysfunctional that they think the other party, the Democrats, are evil. There's good and evil in humanity. And the sad thing is that the evildoers know how to manipulate people into being fools. And we have to learn from it and grow from it, because this is the ugly reality about this programming we're talking about. It's why we speak English. It's why most of us are right-handed. Everything we learn is programming.
My brother was left-handed.
I've been left-handed 3/4 of my life. I was, just like your brother, able to play an entire Fisher game in my head, visualize it on a wall, tell you the formula of every different chemical fucking structure on the planet. And after 3 strokes, I lost a lot of that. Now I have to rely on this brilliant woman over here to recall the names for me and all the ancillary information.
So he's referring to what I told him over text. My brother, when he was 12, he memorized all of Bobby Fischer's chess games in chess code in 3 days.
Wow.
I watched him do it.
I'll guarantee you a book that your brother probably loved. It was the name of the book is White Moves Win in 2.
White Moves? Is
Yeah,
that the book that Bobby Fischer wrote in backwards? Or is that a different one?
So what it does is it sets up a million different scenarios that you have to see 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 or 12 moves ahead, that you have the game won, but you have to do exactly what you have to be perfect in your sequencing to win the game on that 7th move. And for your brother's exactly like me. Your brother would need to read that book because it exists.
Tell her about how your brother and she asked if you knew him, the little story of you sitting there waiting.
Oh, your brother, there's a main hallway that goes down to the dorm facility on the left of the main hallway that goes right into the main what I call the Crazy Eights. That's the building that looks like a figure 8 up from the top view, and it's called Crazy because of the things they did there. He was in the first waiting room, and what it is there's a double door that you go through after you get into the building from the hallway, and there's a security guard there. Then there's another double door and a security guard there, and then to the right there's a waiting room. He was sitting there as I walked in, and he was crying, and I was sitting in another chair. And I went over and held his hand. We just cried, and he said that fucking saying. And he knew they were going to kill him. And I kept trying to inspire him to hold on.
Thank you for sharing that, Mark. Ariadne, do you...
I'm sorry your brother's not alive, too. I would have loved to talk to him.
Me too. Do you want to talk a little bit about maybe your family, Ariadne? I know that you have to go in about 12 minutes or so. I'd love to turn it over to you. Maybe you could talk a little bit about you and your brother's experiences from what you know, and maybe just talk about what you remember being there.
No, I don't. I just wish that I could have talked. I just wish I could have talked to my brother. We never got along.
What was
But
the...
you know what, Mark?
You have to understand what this does to your social behavior. To this day, I do not know how to talk to people. The only thing I know how to do is talk knowledge. You lose your own self-identity in all of this.
But you know what, Mark? My brother's birthday was...
I am the most highly skilled martial artist on the planet, and I'm scared to death of people.
You know, when you were talking about moving refrigerators, I do stuff like that too, and I'm a girl, okay?
Wow.
What's an example, Ariadne?
Oh, I can move things if I need. If it has to be moved, I can move it. It doesn't matter. It's just something I can do. I just wanted to tell Mark, my brother's birthday was Halloween 1956. It was October 31st.
He was so fucking scared.
You know, I'll just finish with this. I'm going to finish with this little story. One of the things I never forgot, he comes to me one day when we're in Stanford Village, and he says, calls me by name, and he says, "Come with me. I want us to ride both of our bicycles through the hallway at Stanford Research Institute. Very fast. I want to scare somebody." I couldn't do it, but I followed him. I walked my bicycle, and I trotted along behind him, and he got on his bicycle at one end of the hallway. And he rode his bicycle really fast down this long straight hallway, zoom. And I just remember following him and looking and seeing people look up, like guys in white lab coats, just kind of stare at him. And we whizzed through the hallway and out the door.
What was the age difference between you and your brother?
16 months older than me.
Did he remember before?
I was never able to talk to him. I was never able to talk to him. I have not been able. I did talk to my mother mostly. I talked to my mother. We never named it, but we were on the same page. We knew what we were talking about.
Did he have explosive rage?
Yes.
Then what your brother did was he fell on the saber, so you didn't have to.
Yeah, that's what my dad did also. That's what my father did.
Then you should be proud as a son of a bitch that you had such good people in your life. It's what made you.
Yeah, I am. I am very proud of my brother and my father, but when they were alive, I couldn't get along with them at all.
Well, you don't know what the rage does to you. You have no idea. It eats you alive.
And the people around you.
You know, he got in trouble. The other thing that happened that year, Mark, is that the police showed up at our door because he and some other boys were throwing rocks into some buildings in Stanford Village.
You want me to profile your brother for you?
They were throwing rocks.
Fear turns into rage. Fear turns into rage. That's what the bicycle thing was about. And that's about anything he ever got into trouble about, was to fight back and to hit the monster. Doesn't matter if you hit the right spot of the monster, you got to hit the monster.
Yeah, the Minotaur. The Minotaur, Ariadne and the Minotaur. Ariadne is the one who finds her way back through the labyrinth, and she helps her brother and lover and father get out of the labyrinth. That's what Ariadne does.
Before you go, I want you to hear what happened to me when I thought my mother saved me from Stanford. And I want to correct one of the things that when you were reading the Stanford thing. There was a movement, the April 3rd movement. And the April 3rd movement, it started creating a living hell on Stanford's campus. The students, the faculty, and this is important, and the administration all voted to take control of Stanford Research Institute. It was, and this can be fought in court to this day. It was illegally sold. After they said we're taking complete control of it, means Mr. President of Stanford, you don't have any right to sell it on your own to begin with, but now you completely don't. So that sale of that nonprofit masturbation, that's a bunch of bullshit. And the students and the faculty and the administration wanted to take control of them, and they rioted and took over and broke into all of the facilities of Stanford Research Institute. But it was because of Agent Orange and all the things that they were doing in the Vietnam War is what they thought was the injustice that they were fighting there. They didn't know about MK Ultra.
They didn't know there were a bunch of children being held hostage in various buildings at Stanford Research Institute, Menlo Park, being subjected to systematic drugging and torture, and it went on for years, all throughout the 1950s and 1960s. The Stanford student protesters did not know about us, the kids. And then 50 years later, when I started remembering being part of the, programs there, all that's MK Ultra, I tracked down as many of the Stanford student protesters as I could find. I began connecting with them, telling them.
None of them had a clue about what was going on. Not even an inkling.
I even flew out to California to talk to Lenny Siegel, who's the leader.
He ran it.
Yeah, he's the leader of the Stanford student protesters. And he didn't even believe me when I told him that Joseph Mengele, the angel of death from Auschwitz, was one of the doctors who tortured us at Stanford. It's really hard to believe, except you have the same people who are at the same place at the same time, and we're all saying the same thing. So you've got eyewitnesses, firsthand witnesses. And in the Bible, it says 2 or 3 witnesses, by 2 or 3 witnesses, every matter will be established. And so with 3 witnesses in a court of law,
And as me, from an outsider, listening, to your stories and now becoming part of it, I mean, it is outlandish. It is very difficult to believe. That's why I always say to Mark, don't talk to people about this, because they just think you're crazy. They think you're lying. Keep your secret and keep it for Places like this. Where you,
I
where
I
you
can
did
prove
go.
I can prove what that one of the things that in the Jewish faith is that there's the Torah and a number of other writings that they're books that are supposed to teach you good citizenry. So when a Jew comes up to you and tells you the story of lying and how it's profoundly bad, what he's saying to you is, I don't have the balls to accuse you of being a liar, but you're a motherfucking liar. And it was because of what Marina just said. I shared a touch of this, and this is what bothers me about humanity. I talk a heavy talk. It's after I've done research. I've been taught by professors, don't vomit what the teacher just taught you. Go and challenge it and make sure it's true before you start vomiting. So what that man should have done is done a lot of research before he had the balls to disrespect me in such a way. And that's the problem with sharing this shit, is people like to live in that little cocoon that makes them feel warm and comfortable. And if you dislodge that comfort, you become the devil.
Yeah, but it is such a strange story.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
It's the reason why I never shared it, because who in the hell would believe it?
No one was allowed to know. Everything was kept covered up. And if anyone broke their programming and started talking about it, or if they would go to a psychologist or a psychiatrist, a doctor, a counselor, and start talking to him, this is what happened to me when I was a little girl or a little boy, they would just be put on antipsychotics and given some kind of diagnosis like paranoid schizophrenia. Survivors have been ostracized and we have not been believed. But now, at this point in time, there's so many of us coming forward, and now we're being given a voice, which I'm very thankful for.
And one of the things that I like to discern, not to disrespect people, but like, for instance, I was raped, and I have a reminder every day of being raped, and I'm going to tell you in detail. But no, I'm going to tell them in detail because they need to know, and they need to be cringe at it. But the difference is that when you're in a secure environment, that means there's nobody overseeing all of those employees inside that secure environment. That means that they can get away with a lot of shit. So one of the people that raped me was an orderly. As he heard noise outside, he quickly stopped and pulled my pants up from behind me and zipped up my zipper from behind. Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you, my penis was sticking out. Now my penis is completely stuck in my zipper. He flees. The nurse who was walking down the hallway making the noise comes in, looks, sees what's going on, shuts the door and leaves. I have to rip my zipper open. Now, what ended up happening is it just didn't penetrate the outside skin. It punctured the sheath that holds 2,000 pounds per square inch of pressure to give a man an erection. So when I was 30 years old, I got another reminder of being raped. My penis exploded and it became 12 inches in diameter. I was bleeding to death. I had to have 87 stitches put into my penis, which made 2.5 laps around my penis. And I had to have my penis in a cast for months. Then the same thing happened to me again when I was 50. So just that one of the 3 rapes I was involved in as a child, I'm reminded on a daily basis. But I do not think that sex trading and all of that is directly part of MK Ultra. I think it's the evildoers knowing that they have access and manipulative tools to take advantage of people. So I think doesn't have anything to do with MK Ultra and might not have anything to do with the CIA, but it's an obvious international problem. But I'm not one of the people that want to link it without profound evidence to MK Ultra, because it doesn't make any sense to jeopardize the most top secret thing in the history of American intelligence. You're not going to jeopardize that for a secondary means of making revenue.
Yeah, it's also that you said the rape wasn't linked to MK Ultra. It was,
even though it happened there.
yeah, the bad people that had access.
So it's a distinct difference in posturing, even though SRI and the CIA is completely responsible for that rape and the other two. Because the other two were my Boy Scout leader, take a wild guess where he worked, and the other Boy Scout leader that was below him. And also Red Riblet, who was in charge of Midnight Climax. Red Riblet, strange as it is, raped me in my father's trailer because he was staying with my father. A flaming gay man. And the only way that flaming gay man stayed out of jail was cooperating with Midnight Climax, the tool that blackmailed my mother.
The CIA is very good at blackmailing people.
And I want the audience to look up everything I've stated. Don't believe one goddamn thing that I said. Look it up and challenge me and prove me wrong, please.
And I want to come back to you, Mark, Marina, and Frida in just a second. Ariadne, I want to be respectful of your time. I know that you have to go unless you're able to stay longer, but I wanted to give you time if there was anything else that you wanted to say before.
I want to make sure that she knows I want to talk to her anytime she wants to talk to me. And I think her and her brother are absolutely freaking amazing. And she should be proud as hell and light a candle for her father and brother every night. They're heroes.
Thank you, Mark. I would love to talk to you. Yeah. Thank you, Emma, for having us. And thank you, Frida. You're the best.
Love
My
you.
sister. I have a new sister. And now I have a new brother too.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Yes.
Ann.
I'll see you all next time, okay?
Thank you so
Okay.
much for coming on and sharing, Ariadne.
Okay, I'll see you next time.
Bye.
Send me an email, Emma. I gave you my email address.
Perfect. Well, I'll connect with you. We'll be sisters too.
Okay.
All right.
Oh, by the way, her brother would have beaten me in chess.
Did you play chess also, Mark?
Yes. And I'm ridiculously good, but somehow or another, he rose above all of the shit that happened and attained a lot more than I could. And one of the things I'll lead with is I have such a high IQ. I don't understand how I couldn't figure out how to function. But it so affected my ability of dealing with other people. You don't know, I haven't told you most of the story, is the valley that the people that came over during Operation Paperclip were wanted people that France and other European countries were looking for so they could put them on trial for crimes against humanity. And putting those people in downtown Palo Alto, obviously foreign intelligence officers can easily find them, versus putting them in the middle of a redwood forest where almost nobody lives. You park on the side of a road, you're going to stand out like a sore thumb. You asking questions about somebody in Ben Lomond, Felton, and Boulder Creek, you know, there's intelligence officers everywhere. You're going to be arrested the third person you ask about somebody. You know, every one of, and please don't believe me, look at the timing from 1946 when SRI was started. And you can actually go back a little bit before that too, because the theorizing how you're going to process building that campus, building that industrial park, which is SRI was part of. All of those are long-term objectives. And every one of the assets from Boulder Creek Country Club to Brookdale Lodge, to Forest Hills Swimming Pool, all of these assets were put in that valley to keep those Germans in that valley and not leaving, because they spoke coarse English. They would have been marked a long ways away. Another thing people don't know is during World War II, all the Japanese obviously are in internment camps. All the Germans have been moved inland. All the Italians have been moved inland, so they can't give ship positions away if they are an agent. So how in the world did the San Lorenzo Valley become 90% German by 1953? How do you go from 0 population to that? Well, it's easy. One of the smartest kids in my graduating class, if I graduated from San Lorenzo Valley High School, was he graduated, interestingly enough, top of his class at Stanford, top of his class at Stanford Law School. He's an entertainment attorney. I talked to him about 6 years ago, and I told him about the show. The only man that was nice to me there, father. This is what he said to me. You know, my father was a Nazi, right? My jaw hits the floor. I knew all of the other people except father. Everybody. Now, every day of my life in that valley, we were the only Jews in that valley of all Nazis. Ask me if any of those Operation Paperclip Nazis ever had to say they disavow hate and all of this stuff. No. Those children came at me with all of that hate that their parents had towards Jews. Every day I had to fight 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 fights a day. Sometimes it was one person, one time, sometimes it's 2 or 3. I never lost a fight in my entire freaking life. People would walk on the other side of the street, they were so afraid of me. I'd have fathers coaching their kids to kick my ass. I had one 18-year-old boy coaching his brother to kick my ass, and when I kicked his brother's ass, he came up to beat my ass up. I was 1.5 feet shorter than him. I somehow or another grabbed behind his knees and tipped his ass over, and he smacked his head on the concrete and knocked his ass out. I walked away as if I just beat this big kid up. The moment I got around the corner, I ran like a little tiny girl scared to death. No, but people were terrified of me, but they kept fighting me because their parents were instilling them to do it. My mother was a professional golfer and bowler. We'd be at the bowling alley, and the same fathers that were trying to get their kids to kick the shit out of me were trying to make me befriend me so my mother would have sex, so they could have sex with 2 women. As if I would forget all of the stuff that happens all the other times. It was living in never freaking land. Now, my mother moves us up to Seattle. I think my mother saved me from Stanford Research Institute. 6 years ago, I'm online and I look up Dr. Donald Dudley, the psychiatrist that my mother took me to right when I got up to Seattle. This is one of the odd things. Every time I go in, I'd remember everything until I go into this doctor's office and then remember nothing that happened in there. I go and all of a sudden I find this article on Dr. Donald Dudley. He's across Lake Washington in Bellevue, where he's arrested because he had a 12-year-old boy running down to the lobby of this expensive hotel with a handgun and completely naked. He's arrested, and it turns out he was the advanced hypnosis programmer for MK Ultra. So my mother wasn't saving me, she was taking me to advanced programming. Tell me, wonderful young lady, how would you feel about your mother through all of this? that my mother would go and spend when she worked at Brookdale Lodge. I found out as an adult a few years ago, it closed at 9. My mother would come home at 2. We lived 15 minutes away. So my mother was more interested in having sex than having children. Couple all that. Would that create some duality of love and hate in you towards your mother? My mother sacrificed me for the health of her other 3 children.
I always wonder, whatever your mother did in those hours is not to say it was her own things. It might have been whatever, but it's just me.
No, I went back and I went to, crazy as it is, San Jose State. It was just mentioned a little bit ago. And when I was going to San Jose State, I was dating my childhood sweetheart. We were engaged. Okay. She's cutting hair, and a kid's mother that I grew up with, you know, the same age as me, came in and she goes, "Aren't you that son of that Jewish lesbian?" Okay, so that's how my mother's known in that valley. Okay, so this is the insane thing that my sister said to me about 3 years ago. She goes, "Isn't it nice that mom didn't chase men around everywhere?" No, she just chased women everywhere. And everybody knew she was just a sex addict. Isn't that a wonderful feeling to know about your mother? No, people need to know the ugly. I am the most pro-gay person on the planet. I have filmed transsexual beauty pageants. I am profound pro. But there's a difference between abusing your children and anything to do with lesbianism. It doesn't matter if that were men she was chasing or women. She should be home with her children. My mother spent 4 hours a day at home sleeping. The moment she'd get home, we'd dive on top of her and she'd scream, "What the hell? Get down! Get out! 5 minutes on my cell phone!" I was never, ever told to brush my teeth, ever told to do my homework, ever. Any of that normal to you?
Not at all.
You know, my mother would have had her children taken away from her 10 years after all of this happened. And we would have been better off. My mother had an opportunity to move to West 45th Street and live in the 4 different gigantic units that were converted by her mother. They were multimillionaires, converted into one gigantic floor that was one gigantic house. We were going to move there. But my mother wanted to stay with her lesbian trysts over the betterment of her children.
Perfect.
These are the ugly truths that are the cause and effect. It has nothing to do with lesbian. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with choices and a moral compass. My mother gave me the tools to survive rather than defending me. How do you forgive that? It's unforgivable. You know how empty it is that my mother didn't chase men? Give me a goddamn break. You know, it's just sad to think that, for instance, I'm talking about overview of MK Ultra. And those are what's called our inspector generals, that there's hundreds of thousands of inspector generals that are their complete job is oversight of Black projects. And for instance, it's only as good as the system that accepts the information from them. What Trump did was just blow off an inspector general's concerns about a project. And if that's all that's necessary to negate an inspector general who already don't have the weaponry to do their job. For instance, an inspector general goes to the general accounting office and the archives to their inside version of doing a Freedom of Information Act. And they don't get the documents. And years later, the guy at the archive says, "Oh, didn't you know we were supposed to give you the documents?" So there's some inside system that's keeping documents away from the people that their jobs are supposed to be getting these documents. So how in the world can you make a system where that inspector general can actually have real oversight over those projects so that child inside that building isn't raped? Or even worse, I mean, our intelligence can be given over to for our enemies, or all of our undercover agents in different countries can be killed from the stupidity of one simple little thing. And there's no system that's working for those inspector generals to be able to have any meaning at all.
I just have one thing I want to briefly insert here. Why were 1 million children in the United States tortured? And we were living here as citizens of the United States of America, and yet we were tortured by the Central Intelligence Agency and all these different institutions under the full protection of the U.S. Constitution, the Nuremberg Code, the Magna Carta. I mean,
well, the Magna Carta not so much,
okay,
but you're perfect. That's a perfect point. Keep going.
yeah. So why were we tortured? And then anytime we try to address this with any of the institutions we were tortured by, they always just pull out this magic blanket called national security. Oh, we can't give you your records. It's a matter of national security.
But see, the national security is so important, and that's the reason why we need those inspector generals that have muscle. Is because we do need to hide things from people. Normal society shouldn't know things, but we have to have a system where we create trust. I mean, case in point, when you go to get an EEG, you need to believe that the EEG is going to be accurate, correct? So when I'm going to the place that I go, and the EKG, I'm sorry, I get them mixed up. I've had a stroke, 3 of them, but you go to get that done to see if you're healthy enough to have surgery. Well, this just happened to me. And now my 4 previous surgeries, it shouldn't take 35 tests to get 4 good results, because the trainer and the person operating it don't know what the hell they're doing. So I go down to a different place where I know they're professionals, and I blindly believe that test. That's what has to happen in intelligence. That inspector general has to have the amount of muscle that bureaucracy isn't going to take away his ability of doing his job. And without that, it's a goddamn fucking shot in the dark, and people are going to be manipulated and raped and sold and traded because these evil people see secondary means of revenue. I mean, this is the craziest thing. And you can read this in a Robert Ludlum book or any other's book, because it's true. A foreign intelligence agent or an American intelligence agent, you're supposed to create your fallback money, okay? So you have to find a way of creating a whole bunch of money, so if you have to go dark, you'll have the money to go dark. So aren't you promoting your agent to do criminal activity, be associated with criminals in order to get a nest egg in case you need to go black? You're exposing your agent to be turned at any given moment for a nest egg to go black. And that was acceptable behavior under even inspector generals. How is that? The Jews have a good word for that, mashugana. Stupid, shithead, whatever. That's what mashugana means. It means you are so fucking dumb that you're making the worst choice possible and why? This entire thing makes complete sense. You know, we've had programmed fools forever. But getting back to those treaties, who in the world would feel safe if America had a flying saucer right now? Could we not take over every country on the planet? It's the same way with an MK Ultra agent. A weapon that you can't see and measure is deadly to somebody else.
Can I interject here? What gets to me is the story about the Church Commission, where they promised to help these MK Ultra people, but they never did. So they left these people in 1973, 76, after the Church Commission, where they said, okay, it happened, okay, we will help you, we will find you and we will help you. They didn't. So I just wish, and somehow they can come forward now. And it's way too late, but they can go forward now and try and help.
It's really profound, and also you can go online and you can see the Ed Bradley interview with the CIA director, who is talking specifically about this, about how many people have you found in the 10 years since you made the agreement with the Senate. And the reason why the Senate made that agreement was the Senate was about to air on television their investigation of MK Ultra. And this is what the director stated with his agreement to the Senate, that we just shredded, and he made a statement to the public, we just shredded all the evidence. Well, the CIA has to adhere to the same laws as you and I do. And if you and I can go to jail for shredding evidence, let's use the Donald Trump thing as a particular story. When you have documents that somebody wants back, give them back. Don't fight it. You know, how in the hell can the CIA, how is the CIA, when they admit to a crime, not prosecuted for that specifically then, for shredding the evidence? It just astounds me that you go to a news reporter right now and you'll talk about MK Ultra and they'll say, well, that's just old hat. You know, that was the 70s. But there was never any conclusion. Just like Ed Bradley found out, there was no, the most powerful intelligence service that can find anybody on the planet can't find the people they victimized. Well, the only way that happens is if you don't look. Ed Bradley asked another question. It has to do with me. He said, can you tell me about Subproject 54? This is what the director said on camera. Oh, the Navy decommissioned that. And Ed Bradley pulls out a document and says, right here, no, you took it over. And then the CIA director came a different answer and said, oh, we took it over and decommissioned it instantly. And Ed Bradley said, so what you're telling me is you spent millions of dollars to take it from the Navy and then you instantly decommissioned it. Do you believe that? So that's a specific story about the project that I was in.
I also want to jump in and say, so many of the victims started remembering in their 40s and 50s about this.
I remembered every moment.
Remembers every moment.
He never forgot.
See, one of the things is
why
one of the things is they're constantly testing you. And I make the analogy of, let's pretend like I just invented a gun. Now I'm going to have to test the parameters of how that gun works. What distance is it accurate at? How often do I have to clean it? All the nuances of that gun I need to really know and I need to test. Now let's take that gun and apply it to an MK Ultra agent. You can do, when you have that person in the created personality, what you have to do is you have to find out if a simulated killing is going to have what's called bleed over from the real personality or from the created personality to the real personality. Okay? Because you have to know if your agent is now going to be able to go through that lie detector test and not know what happened. So that bleed over is profound. But here's the big but. a simulated assassination isn't going to spray tissue and blood all over the killer, is it? So are they not going to have to test that MK Ultra agent in a real killing? Now I'll give you a little bit of the evidence I have about another group of killings. I bet you $1 you've heard of the Zodiac killer, haven't you?
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you do some newspaper reading about all the different newspapers articles on the Zodiac killing? And you know what you'll find? The CIA assisting all these police departments. Isn't that wonderful? They were so upset with all these killings that they wanted to help. Yet the laws of the CIA state they're not supposed to operate in the United States. And the San Francisco Bureau was only supposed to be working at Stanford Research Institute on campus, so they were legally right to operate in the United States. So ask yourself, why were they so enthusiastically assisting all those police departments? Then think about, well, maybe one of those killings was a test of a MK Ultra agent to see if the tissue in the blood is going to create bleed over. Then look into all of those ciphers. Where, do you know where the leading place of encrypted messaging is to this day and was then too? The Alameda military base. That's where all the codes during World War II were broken. That's where they're broken to this day. And any one of those guys would have told you right away that those encryptions were a bunch of crap. So there's a lot of evidence that the Zodiac killings were MK Ultra test kills. The test, you might have remembered a Jason Bourne movie where he's always trying to understand this killing that he did in Germany, yet it's not on his record. It was to test his bleed over. Isn't it interesting that all of these nuances of MK Ultra are so profoundly embedded in Robert Ludlum's writings? One of the things that we're going to be talking about in my show, we're going to be going into finding those nuggets in Robert Ludlum's writings of what he was dripping out. Because if he's dripping out things, it's not just MK Ultra. If his job is to drip out information so we don't find it out all at once, then he's going to be dripping out other national and international information. And it's profound. And yes, I have found some of it. And it's stark. I did a Freedom of Information Act on Robert Ludlum. I got back, it's not unclassified back yet. I asked for a Freedom of Information Act on my mother. I was told that I need the project name and the sub-project name. I need my contract that I signed to be part of the project. And I go, isn't that interesting? You know that I was 3.5 years old. How in the world would anybody accept a contract signed by a 3.5-year-old? As if I signed anything to be part of this. There's so many hinky things that the news reporters don't want to look at. And isn't it interesting that it's only American news reporters, the same people that were told that, oh, UFOs are just, you're supposed to roll your eyes or you're not going to get your news reporter job in America if you talk about UFOs. You know, let's say there are or aren't UFOs, but if you take a topic and disrespect even the potential possibility of listening to any evidence, you're mitigating the potential of what you're going to learn. You have to learn. You have to listen to the nonsense to find the nuggets of truth. You know, and without listening, and one of my cliches is that And I use it to make fools out of people a lot. Because what it is a measuring tool. And it's the truth. I state, and it's profoundly true. I miss having conversations with conservatives because I would learn so much from them. And they'd learn things from me too. And we'd walk away from that conversation feeling like humanity's working. And I miss that profoundly. The last person I said that to, you know what he did? He went into a MAGA diatribe screaming at Marina and I as we're sitting at his dining room table about to do a free month's worth of work house sitting his house and his pets for nothing. He goes into a MAGA diatribe and he says at the end of conversation. When my statement was, I miss conversations, and he just jumps into a diatribe and then ends the conversation. So if we want to make humanity better, we need to have those conversations. We need to have preachers not making the devil out of one of the political parties in this country. We need to create dialogue, not hate. We need to create dialogue and hope. You lose any of those, you've lost humanity. So it's our responsibility to give hope to humanity. And to create, imagine if you were born in the wrong body, what it must feel like to have the need to change sex. Those aren't easy decisions. And these are tearing our country apart. And this is part and parcel to MK Ultra, because when people learn to use brainwashing as a tool, that's terrifying, because we don't need to have people go into a lab anymore. It could be done on a self-improvement program, or it can be done on subliminal programming on anything. We don't need to be in that lab anymore. And we need to be cognizant and stand up against this injustice where people don't have their First Amendment rights. You know, they don't have the humanity to learn from what happened during World War II. Dialogue is the only solution. Look at what nationalism and war has done to the history of humanity on this planet. If there's aliens, they must think we are so emotionally damaged that they should never contact us. I mean, we must look like a goddamn zoo that's out of control. That's my take on MK Ultra and how to get away from this control and manipulation.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that. That's so
I diatribed and I apologize for it, but this is so important. And you giving us an avenue is profoundly important. And let me tell you, young lady, I'm going to promote the crap out of your show when I start soon. And it's profound. You have to honor the people that push the rock forward.
I appreciate you. And I'll have to have you on again too, so we can talk more about your show. I want to talk a little bit too about Stanford and what types of programs that they were running there and what you guys remember from that. Mark, I know that you have full memories. Frida, I know you have maybe a few. I could be wrong, maybe you have more, but I'd love to enlighten people on what goes on and what was going on at these, research institutes and these universities, and I think that this is like a really important part of history. We're not taught this, so having light shed on it is so important for people to understand your experiences too. And you guys get to talk on behalf of everybody who doesn't have a voice that went through those programs.
Hold on. Is it on?
Just right.
Oh,
Is it on?
oh, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, it's on.
Okay.
We're just charging.
Yeah, we have a low battery, so we're making sure.
Oh yeah, you got to charge it.
Yeah. So you want us to talk about what actually happened there?
Yeah, Let's shine a light on Stanford specifically, since that's where your stories took place, and show how this big picture, what you're talking about, how they are institutionalizing it in these smaller sectors, learning from it, and then they're perpetuating it on everybody else. You know, they're using you guys as the guinea pigs to say, how do we control the world? You know, it starts in these.
I can tell you the simplest standpoint is you don't even need to interpret what somebody's displaying. So when somebody pushes forward a tower, a Hoover Tower, when somebody displays a Lewis Terman building, when somebody displays an elementary school named after eugenicists, and for 65 years, people have fought them to change those names, you have to ask yourself, why is it so important to keep those names? Do you know what Hoover is famous for? Our Constitution says, and the Constitution is why I love my country so much, when a normal person would hate the country that tortured him. It's because the Constitution, they were raping as much as I was being raped. So you have to ask yourself why things happen. And good people don't do evil things without a reason. So, you know, there's so many things that are involved with Stanford that people fail to actually see. And one of the things is that how many of those graduate students that were living in that dorm, there was only fucking 6 rooms available. You had to know everybody in those other rooms. So how many of those graduate students should be coming forward talking about, well, why were there kids there? That doesn't make any sense at all. That was for graduate students only. Students. How many people can move into a dorm building with children? That's an unusual thing that it seems like a lot of people should come forward and talk about children living in a dorm room.
I think a lot of the adults who were working at Stanford Research Institute during the 50s and 60s a lot of them have passed away now, because you and I are in our 60s.
You know, here's one of the anecdotal pieces of information is the last day that I went to Stanford Research Institute was the riot at Stanford Research Institute.
The April 3rd movement.
And when we drove out in the Highfields Ford van, you know, school bus, we got in the middle of the riot, and there were photographs. Now, I'm still trying to find them. I'm told that the different newspapers have archives that you can go in, and we're intending to do that soon. But there's photographs. I've seen it in the Green Library at Stanford, but I didn't have my phone with me. I didn't get photographs. My late girlfriend did, and that was on her phone where she died in New Jersey, and I wasn't able to get her phone. But it's a picture of our van almost getting overturned, and a blonde-haired goofball with his eyes the size of frisbees in the front windshield, terrified that the van was going to get turned over. It was a picture of me and the other kids in the van, which places my ass at Stanford Research Institute. And even though I have a lot of other evidence, that photo would be profoundly important. And one of the people that helped me steer me to that photo was the person who was running the library, and right next to the right on the other side of the railroad tracks from the corporate SRI that's on the other side, right? He said, oh yeah, I was a graduate student at the Stanford Green Library, and you can find it there, and he sent me to where all the freaking evidence is. And he even said, did you know there's secret libraries too? So there's secret libraries that the librarians actually know about. There's about 45 libraries. It's confusing as hell at Stanford.
There's a basement underneath the Cecil H. Green Library on the Stanford University campus, and it's as big as a football
That is
field.
not the Green Library. That's a different library.
Okay.
I don't have no idea where the secret library that the guy's talking about.
Yeah.
So I have no clue.
But this one, they've got like artifacts from Stanford, actually became a school even before 1900. But there's all kinds of stuff down there. And I actually read an article on the internet back in 2016 when I first started researching all this, that said that they had actually discovered records from SRI in the basement of the library on Stanford campus.
There's no way that they shredded the evidence for MK Ultra. It's the most powerful information to make a monster. Come on. It's like somebody saying, we got the nuclear weapon, we spent $1 billion on it, but who cares? And shreds it. Come on. That doesn't happen.
No, they invested millions or billions of dollars into MK Ultra. So Mark and I believe that they're hiding the records.
No, you know what the Inspector General said about MK Ultra? Why are we torturing our own citizens? Instead of saying it's wrong, hey, let's take it to Mexico and torture them. That's okay. I mean, that's the problem I keep stating about Inspector Generals. Because if there's not a system that's going to force that Inspector General to define that as an evil thing you're doing, I mean, and here's the problem. Directly after MK Ultra was supposedly stopped in the United States, isn't it wonderful? All these organizations started opening up all these clinics in Central and South America. Sounds wonderful, isn't it? You're not old enough, but we are. In the 80s and the 90s, all of a sudden the United States was being accused of kidnapping all these children from Central and South America. You know where all those children were kidnapped from? The same areas that all of a sudden got those clinics coming into their area. All of a sudden, a clinic comes into the area, and all of a sudden, children start disappearing in that specific area. And after that Inspector General's statement of why are we torturing our own citizens, it creates the inference that, well, where'd those children go? And what a perfect scenario. You just go to a little village and kidnap kids and take them somewhere else to experiment on them. And there's no record at all. And here's what's even scarier. You can find photographs of kids in modern electronic hardware being shocked on electroshock tables.
I have a question I want to interject. Mark, can you describe to all of us what a typical day would be like for you at SRI? Like what you went through? Just so that.
Well, I can't remember the person's name because of my strokes, but he's this guy that goes around and brags about, he's Mr. Remote Viewer. Okay. I got on the phone with him and I said, I was one of the people that, were part of the remote viewing thing originally at Stanford. And he goes, difference between you and me is I'm a professor and I'm a professional. And those Cambridge people that talk with the silver spoon and the pinky sticking out and the arrogance and talking down to you like a child. And I go, okay, since you're such a professional, why don't you remote view me? I'll remote view you. Well, his didn't go all that well. But I told him about the cedar beaded ceiling boards that he had on in his room, the mauve wall color, the overstuffed love seat he was sitting on, his plaid shorts that he was wearing with his dorky looking thongs on. And for some reason, he wasn't too interested in remote viewing me.
Mark, she asked you a typical day as a child.
What would a typical visit to SRI?
That's what I'm saying. And it started off with all of the remote viewing stuff. They start off with tests of ESP. They're trying to define your accuracy. They're trying to define your motivation and trying to see what's in the other room. What's going on the football field, those types of things. And testing you.
So you get tested to see what you are seeing is going on somewhere else.
So every now and then I'd say something arrogant to the doctor, saying, I can smell your stroganoff from here. He was in the other room. And he smirked at me because I guess he likes stroganoff.
But Mark, tell them about your typical day. About
That's what happens.
No, I'm talking about the children in your school, the fights you had.
Oh, that typical day?
No,
It was the nightmare from hell.
Yeah.
It was if you want to know a typical day away from Stanford Research Institute, it was a living hell.
Oh, right.
Imagine going to school in your pajamas. How would your day start if you went to school in your pajamas because you didn't know you had your pajamas on? And it go downhill from there. Or better yet, these three boys that hated me so much, and then every now and then they'd pretend to be my friend, and I was so desperate for a friend, I'd get fooled into it. And then after they fooled me into thinking that they were my friend, they'd all openly mock and laugh at me that I fell for it again. Yeah, my days were wonderful. Wonderful.
You would go from
I'd outrun them. I set the fucking United States record in 9th grade for the 100-yard dash. Why did I stop participating in sports? Well, let me say, Mr. Larkin stated, Mark, the reason why you're not starting on the basketball team is the coach works part-time as a park ranger, and the kid that's starting over you is his boss. His father is his boss. I was profoundly the best athlete that, let me think. I wonder why Coach Overbeck hated this Jew so goddamn much. You think it has anything to do with his father was an Operation Paperclip doctor at Stanford, and he was our coach.
I guess what I was
It was being around Nazis every day, fighting every day. And then your day improves. No, it doesn't. When you go to Stanford Research Institute.
Then you get drugged and tortured.
Do you know what it's like to every motherfucking day, every minute of every fucking day, all you think about is how you're going to kill yourself, where you're going to kill yourself, and when you're going to kill yourself.
I'm glad you're still here.
People have no idea.
But they would tell you.
I imagine if you saw in such high resolution everything that's ever happened to you all the time. And the doctors tell you there's nothing they can do. You can't erase scars. You have no idea what evil can do to a human, let alone a child.
But when would they take you to Stanford during your day? Would it be?
It would be sometimes during the day. So they check me out of school. Sometimes my mother would take me first thing in the morning. Sometimes I'd stay there for a few days. Sometimes I'd go for most of the day. When I went to Highfields Farm, I'd spend 2 or 3 days there at a time. We went on a trip, Highfields Farm, to Palm Springs. I have my notebook to this day. I have 45 pages of notes going down there. Not one note on the way back. I'm anal about that. I don't remember one thing that happened on that flight back. Oh yeah, Wendy, Disney name, another Stanford part-time teacher student. It's weird. She was wearing a pink polka dotted dress down and back when we went to Palm Springs. Did you know Sirhan says that a woman in a pink polka dotted dress gave him the information under programming to kill Robert Kennedy? To this day, they're trying to still find out who that woman in the pink polka dotted dress is. Would you be surprised that the time that we would have been going through Los Angeles from Palm Springs is the exact time that Robert Kennedy was killed?
But you're not saying, you are theorizing now.
No, I'm stating that I think that fucking woman was part of it. No uncertain terms. No uncertain terms. Even the description of her being a blondish reddish hair. And help me with this. What color hair more often would wear a pink polka dotted dress? Blonde reddish hair? So there's a lot of hinky things that are going on. Sirhan, the police state, they've never experienced somebody as calm as he was that they've given a parking ticket for, let alone arresting the guy for killing a presidential candidate. There's everything. Right. There was a notebook that was full of Robert Kennedy must die, Robert Kennedy must die, Robert Kennedy must die, Robert Kennedy must die. Hundreds of pages of the same statement written again and again. If that's not the definition of programming, I don't know what is. Then you take the Unabomber. The only thing you can find online of any consequential information at all of Harvard's participating in MK Ultra was hypnotics programming. And what one of the profound documents that I like to quote is that the hypnotist programmer programmed these two girls to build this bomb. They thought it was a real bomb and plant it in the women's bathroom. And this is what the scientist said totally devastated him, and it was unexpected. The girls go into the bathroom under programming, and there's some women in the bathroom. They, under hypnosis, changed the programming plan to wait for the women to leave, then plant the bomb, then to go back to the room where they're programmed in and lay on the couch and go to sleep. And that's one of the primary things that they did. They say Ted Kaczynski was there at 13 and they were doing deprivation, you know, saying horrible things to him and see how it affected him. There's very little evidence that they did any type of that at all at Harvard, but plenty of.
So I remember that my twin sister and I, so Claire and I had our own room that we were assigned at Stanford Research Institute inside the building that's shaped like the number 8 from an aerial view. And we had that room together. You know, in the morning, Mark remembers a lot more than I do. I remember specific incidents, I guess. But basically we were, I think I just wrote about this. I remember at night, you know, sometimes I would just stay awake all night, and there was a window. You spent the night at SRI, Mark, didn't you? Okay, so
I stayed in the dorms.
In the dorms, okay. So I remember looking out the window, and I would be staring at the stars in the sky, and I knew as long as the stars were still shining brightly, that, you know, those bad people weren't going to be coming very soon to get us. I knew. So I would watch the stars, and then okay. As I remember, as the night went on and morning approached, the stars gradually began to fade. And I knew when the stars were fading that the bad people were going to come back, you know, because once the sun came up, they would come back and get us to take us to whatever they were going to do to us that day. And I just remember feeling just a sense of fear, and then it became terror, and it was like you just become like a zombie. I mean, you just have to you have to cut off your ability to feel, and I think it comes automatically. You just can't. You got to cut off all feeling, because to feel anything is going to be very painful. So Claire and I shared a room together. She was more of a fighter. With twins, you always have a dominant twin and a submissive twin. Claire was dominant, I was submissive. So she would scream, she'd fight back, and I was just very submissive until, oh, and another thing, Mangala would do, because Mangala loved to experiment on twins. And so when he was torturing my twin sister with electroshock, he would force me to watch. And that was really hard. And he did that at Auschwitz as well. So I did a lot of research on him. I didn't get my memories back of Stanford until I was 55 years old. So I've done a lot of research since then. 55 was the magic number. That was when I heard that song that I told you about, the prayer.
Yeah.
And that triggered, or that was the catalyst for opening the door to remembering. And it was very much, I mean, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, can you talk about that? You wrote it in the email. Would you be able to share about that experience?
Sure. So it was 2016, and I was living in Longview, Washington. I had an apartment there, and I like to listen to good music. Like, I like classical music, I like opera, light opera. And so one day I was just looking through YouTube, and I came across, it was an audition on Britain's Got Talent. These two young teenagers, Jonathan Antoine and Charlotte Giaconelli, singing the prayer. Well, when I saw that, it says, two teenagers singing opera, I thought, well, I like opera, so I want to listen to these teenagers. And I listened to them singing, and it was like, the feeling was just indescribable. It was like a door. It was like I knew I had heard them sing before. I knew I had heard these teenagers sing this song, but it seemed like it was such a long time ago that it felt like another lifetime. And I thought, but how could it be that I had heard these two? Because they're only teenagers. How could I have heard them sing before this song and everything? But it was like, as I listened to the song, it was like a door opened up in my heart, and just like rivers of pain started flowing out of me, pain and grief. And then I started crying. But it was so weird, Emma, because usually, I mean, if I hear a beautiful song, I can cry, but not like this. I've never cried like this in my life. And I thought, well, it was just having this effect on me. And it was also, I could, like, my twin sister passed away in 2013. So it was like she was standing next to me, and I'm listening to this song. So I thought it had something to do with her and me. And so I just kept listening, and just like heart-wrenching sobs. And I just kept listening, and I would listen to it every day. Sometimes I would listen to it like several times a day. I would play the prayer sung by Jonathan and Charlotte in the bathtub in the morning, and cry and cry and cry. And I get dressed, I listen. So this went on. And finally I said, okay, God, why do I keep listening to this song? And why do I keep crying? What is this about? And all he said was, keep listening. And so I kept listening. And this went on for weeks and weeks, at least 2 or 3 months. And then I asked him again, why do I keep listening to this song? And why do I keep crying? And then he said, you're remembering something from long ago. And then he opened up my memory, and I remembered the first experiment that Dr. Mangala did on me when he injected my eyes. My twin sister and I were born with blue eyes. That was written in my baby book. And then he injected my blue irises with a chemical, turning them brown. And I'll tell you, that hurt. And then his 17-year-old son, Rolf, was visiting him. Rolf was not raised by his father. Rolf was raised by his mother, Irene Schoenbein. And so Rolf somehow convinced his mom, I want to go see dad. So she sent him to the United States. Well, his dad was working at Stanford Research Institute. So when I was a little tiny baby, got my eyes injected, Rolf was given the responsibility of watching over me so I didn't bleed out, And so I'm in this little tiny crib somewhere at Stanford Research Institute. 17-year-old Rolf Mangala is standing at the foot of my crib, and all of a sudden the whole the whole room was filled with singing. And that was the first time I heard that song. And I was just a baby. And I think, I mean, it was the prayer, it was Jonathan and Charlotte, and the version was their audition version, not when they were all polished and better. It was when they went out there as teenagers, 16 and 17 years old. And I heard them sing that as a little tiny, I was terrified. I was just a baby. And I believe that God gave me that song just so that when I finally did remember 55 years later, he gave it to me a second time to let me know that he was with me at Stanford as a tiny baby. He was with me, and he wanted me to know that. And 55 years later, when I heard that song for the second time, I knew I was going to be okay, because he was with us when we were being tortured. And he's still with us today. And it's hard. I understand it's really hard for the people that survived this to actually believe there's a God who actually cares about them. But it was hard for me. Most of my life, I felt like God didn't love me, and not until I was in my 30s. And then I started, like, my heart started changing. I thought maybe I need to learn more about God. Maybe I need, and, but anyways, it was that song that he gave me. And if you actually sit down and read the lyrics of this song, the whole thing was about me. I mean, it was about the things, that I was there and I was blind in my crib. Okay. And I was in a lot of pain. And then I hear this song. And then when I look at the lyrics, 55 years later, the very first line of the song is, I pray you will be our eyes and watch us where we go. Well, yeah, I need God to be my eyes because mine were blinded at that point, and but it's if you listen to the song, if you read the lyrics, it's so incredibly beautiful. And how could it be that Jonathan and Charlotte sang to me when I was a baby, when they weren't even born until the 1990s? Well, God exists outside of time. He's much greater than our understanding of him. And I believe that all souls, all of us, he created us in heaven. Okay, he's our creator. And it doesn't matter what, he can make you any age he wants to. But I'm the first one that heard Jonathan and Charlotte audition, okay, in 1961. And they got my vote to win. Actually, they both went on to awesome, they both have like awesome careers in singing now. He's like a world-class tenor or baritone, probably both. He's just incredibly talented. And so that was God saying, hey, you know what? I know you're really hurting right now, but I'm with you. And music, God uses music to bring healing, and so that was just his special gift to me. So anyways, thank you for asking me about that.
Do you care if I play a song?
I'm sorry?
Would you care if I played the video that you sent me of them singing?
That's fine. Yeah, if you want to. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. I had moved it to the place where whenever they start singing, so I have it all ready. So if that's okay with you, it
Sure.
brought me tears whenever I listened to it after reading your message. So I want to share it. Share. Okay.
Here we go.
Giustizia e speranza,
time too, and I thought it was so beautiful. And so whenever you sent that, I was like, oh my gosh, like I've listened to that. You know? Oh my goodness, it's beautiful.
Emma.
I appreciate you sharing.
Thank you.
There's a girl over in England that also did that song really well too. Anne Marie.
Anne Marie.
She's this just cute as buds, wonderful little girl that came out with a hit song, her and her girlfriends when they were 12. And she does like a huge variety of songs. And she was she was the judge for a number of years on Britain's Got Talent. Oh no, The Voice in Britain. And with Tom Jones and just she's just one of these absolutely wonderful, wholesome, sweet little girl that is so hip and poignant that it's pretty cool.
Amazing. It's so interesting to me how God finds these different ways to guide people into healing and remembering. And it's always so gentle, you know, and I think it's so amazing like how personalized all this is, you know, like you heard that and like you just happen to click on it. It wasn't even like you're watching that show all the time, you know. It's like, what of all the things you could have clicked on, all the episodes, all the
There's nothing more powerful than recharging a soul than music.
Yes.
It's the reason why that hypnotist, knowing that I listen to music on the bike, used the music as that central programming. Here, you want to hear the dark side of that hypnotist?
Yes.
Here's the real dark side of that hypnotist. I went back a second time. She said, I am not ever hypnotizing you again. I'm not going in there. There's too many people that have been in there before. And how many people refuse to take your frickin' money? You know what happened to me? I was cycling 100 miles a day, and I was cutting 5 to 7 minutes off. The first 5 days, I was taking 5 to 7 minutes off my time. And I was riding over, this is after I've had 23 surgeries on my right knee. 17 of them are major reconstructions of my right knee. Now I have an artificial knee, but not then. I was cycling with a massive leg and a half the size leg at over 37 miles an hour, doing an elevation gain of over 4,500 feet.
Wow.
I would cycle under assumed names under category 4. I was cycling from Woodinville, Washington, to give you fact, up to Snoqualmie Pass and back every day, and cycling at 32 years old against 18-year-olds, when at the same time, they started the seniors category at 32. And I didn't have the sprinting speed because of the imbalance of my legs that everybody else had. So I just had to grind them out. So I would just take off from the peloton and just ride at a hellacious pace and get miles. And I was beating category 1 people on a regular basis, and category 2 because I was a category 4. And after a short period of time, I would have had to move up to category 3. And when I finally did, I started riding in other people's licenses because I was riding on my own, and cycling is made up of teams, where the star of a team just lags in the back of a peloton. What happens in a peloton is one person will lead, and then he'll drop off and just catch on the back of that group, right? That's what a peloton is, a group. And then each person pulls for 30 seconds, 40 seconds, a minute, and then they'll drop back, because when you're pulling, you're breaking the wind for everybody else, so you're doing a massively more work. So when that star of the team always stays on the back of the peloton, he's doing half the work than everybody else is. So he's the star, so he gets to save his energy to sprint to the end and win. Well, after a short while, people would try to do dirty tricks with me. And I said, I'll be at the finish line. You better be careful who you fucking play with. And it just got unfun because people were being pussies. It's like being in a martial arts fights that I've been in plenty, that somebody else stands in for you the first 2 rounds. And while the guy's already tired, then you step in. It's shameful. It's noble to lose. It's losing nobly. It defines who you really are. Sports is supposed to be nothing more than teaching us how to behave respectfully around each other. Most of us aren't going to be pro athletes. It's a process in learning to be a good citizen. And it's so sad when people lose sight of that and they get seduced by power or seduced by winning, and they cheat and they do all these little things. And I learned a profound lesson, because when we moved to Seattle, Seattle is bordered on the east side by a lake called Lake Washington. In the center of Lake Washington is Mercer Island. They finally put in this concrete floating bridge to it in the 40s. Okay. This is where all the executives from Boeing would live. So from the day I moved up there 20 years earlier, it got the nickname the Golden Rock, because all the wealthiest people live there. All the wealthiest spoiled brat children go there. Mercer Island High School, for instance, every year the sophomore team would get 2-year-old equipment. Why? Because every year the varsity got new equipment for every sport, which means the JV got 1-year-old equipment, which means the sophomore got 2-year-old equipment. And we didn't get teachers at Mercer Island High School. We got professors that were hired away from universities to come teach high school at Mercer Island High School. It was the height of spoiledness, and it was a surreal change from the nightmare of San Lorenzo Valley, but it was just as horrible in different ways. So the consequences are stark. But
so Mark, what were they grooming or programming you for? Was there a certain goal or role they wanted you to be in?
I remember some of the missions that I was on, and what would happen, and it's in my script. They'd come and get me, and they had a statement that they'd say to me that would put me in my personality, other personality. And it was something that was so different than every day of my life. It's like ridiculous. I'm not a fisherman at all. I don't like killing animals. So, of course, it turns out that the phrase that they'd use to put me under a hypnotic state would be, "It's time to go fishing." So they would take me, and I described the rescue mission in the North Iran I made a presentation to James Alexander down in Brentwood, California. And James Alexander's son won an Academy Award for what's the kid's name that did Edward Scissorhands? I have a problem with names because of my stroke. Johnny Depp.
Yeah.
So it's a movie that Johnny Depp played, this inept producer. James Alexander's son won an Academy Award for writing that. So I was making a presentation to James Alexander for this Texas guy who was, for his own private electric company, was trying to raise money to expand his company. And after he got his funding, we went over to a coffee shop, and I asked him what he did for a living previously, and he said he was a CIA agent. And have you ever seen Argo?
Yeah, it's been a while. I've seen that.
He was one of the CIA agents. He was the Ben Affleck character. His name was Paul Meir. And he did, he said, I said, "What was your most important mission that you could tell me about?" And he said, it took us 3 months to sneak out of Iran, hiding in so-and-so's embassy. I turned out to be the Canadian embassy. I didn't remember it, but somebody told me later. So I described the scene in North Iran that I'm not going to go into the detail to describe to you right now. But he said, you're the first person that ever accurately described the scene in North Iran. And I said, well, then if you know so much, tell me, how did a helicopter who had landed 30 minutes earlier, whose props were barely turning, explain to me how that helicopter flew 200 feet and smashed into a C-130 refueler and exploded? And explain to me how all those noble warriors are running around on fire crying for their mommies as they died. I said, how did that helicopter fly over there? And he said, a shoulder-launched missile, which means one of the people sabotaged that mission to make sure it failed. Now I'll tell you the backstory. George H.W. Bush secretly and illegally flew in a military plane before he was the vice president to Paris, made a secret deal with the Iranians to hold the American hostages an additional year, which meant every one of them were tortured every day for another 365 days and be released the moment that Reagan was sworn in. That's exactly what happened. So Reagan and Bush sabotaged that rescue mission that Jimmy Carter did to make sure they were elected president. If you don't believe me, people, go online and look. There's an interesting book that people should read. It was written by a law professor to make sure George H.W. Bush wasn't elected. It failed, but ultimately he wasn't reelected. The book is The Unofficial Biography of George H.W. Bush. You can read it online for free, and it will profoundly devastate you. E. Howard Hunt was right. He placed on E. Howard Hunt's deathbed, he placed Lee Harvey Oswald at the morning meeting before Kennedy was assassinated, Rodriguez to George H.W. Bush's deathbed, his best friend, the number of other people, including E. Howard Hunt. And he also stated that we all knew Oswald was a double agent working for the FBI. George H.W. Bush was also placed at that morning meeting. And here's an interesting thing that you can also find online. FBI documents stating that George H.W. Bush called the FBI and said, I was at a grocery store yesterday in Houston or in Houston or Dallas, I'm not sure. And I heard the bad boy stating he was going to kill the president. The FBI agent was so hinked, he traced the call, and it turned out that Bush was calling from his boat that he said was in the Gulf of Mexico, but it turned out it was actually in downtown Dallas. Why was he calling from a CB radio on his boat rather than a phone? And secondly, 3 different interviews that George H.W. Bush had after the Kennedy assassination, he placed himself in Washington, D.C., Houston, Texas, and Denver, Colorado. You'd think that I remember exactly where I was when President Kennedy was assassinated. My third grade teacher broke down when on the speaker, the principal said that Kennedy had just been assassinated. I remember exactly where I was, but somebody that in a highfalutin position as Bush doesn't. This all goes back to a Scottish person started reading Greek literature and came up with the eugenics formula that they had been practicing in the Greek time, that they're superior gened humans and the inferior ones need to be destroyed. Now, this would have been nothing more than a Scottish racist emphasizing hate, unless there was a financier that financed it to become a worldwide movement. And that's what E.H. Harriman was. E.H. Harriman was a railroad tycoon. If you ever watched the real movie of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, right, with Robert Redford, they were robbing E.H. Harriman's train. The guy, Butch would say, "Open up the door," and he said, "No, I'll lose my job. E.H. Harriman will fire me if I open the door." E.H. Harriman funded eugenics worldwide. If you go and watch a movie, it's called Sarajevo, and it's how World War I was started. A Jew was actually hired to investigate Archduke Ferdinand's assassination, and he was forced with his girlfriend's death that had been kidnapped if he didn't comply with the way they wanted it to happen. But he actually did a real investigation and found out World War I happened because eugenics took over Europe right before this. Harriman had forced the sale of all of the gun manufacturers worldwide to his henchmen. He sold both sides 3/4 of all the weapons that they used during the vehicle of World War I. Harriman's plan was to put a railroad in after they won World War I in a 6-week vehicle. They now own Yugoslavia. They could put a railroad in from Baghdad to Berlin. And here's a back note. The reason why Germany lost World War I and World War II is the fuel they intended to ship from Baghdad to Berlin. If they had the fuel, they would have won World War I and World War II. So World War I literally was a eugenics movement to take over Yugoslavia and the rest of the world through their movement. And it is, I thought I knew everything about eugenics. Then I watched this movie, which is, and you know, and what do they call it?
Sarajevo.
No, or Sarajevo. And you know, when they have the words across the bottom and, you know, they're speaking in a foreign language, it's difficult to follow, but it goes into intimate detail because it's written from that investigator's, you know, what do they call it when you're writing things in a diary? A diary.
Like a first.
You know, it's from his diary of how that movie. For instance, Archduke Ferdinand's route that he was going to travel in a parade was broadcast for weeks, so everybody knew where he'd be. Okay, they had an attempted killing of him. They failed. They took the Archduke back to the castle, and what did they do? Since the people that were protecting Archduke Ferdinand were part of the vehicle of getting him killed, they sent him back out there, and this time they stopped the car right in front of the assassins so they wouldn't miss. So he found out that this was an entire setup in order to take over Yugoslavia, because Archduke Ferdinand wanted everybody to have the right to vote in Yugoslavia, and they wanted all of the lesser humans to be slaves. And it goes into graphic detail. It proves that Harriman is the vehicle of World War I. The only problem is E.H. Harriman didn't live long enough for World War I, so it was his son, Averell Harriman, and his wife, who, crazy as it is, she ended up opening up the eugenics worldwide office in New York City. And to this day, there's still a 13-story building that's still owned by the Harrimans and the eugenics movement. The only difference is they took all of it was a gigantic library and a vehicle for them to stay funded forever because they own this 13-story building and having millions of dollars to back it. This is a worldwide movement, and the president of Stanford was nicknamed the California eugenicist. California was the #1 place that had the highest percentage of forced sterilizations under the eugenics movement. In the United States, before World War II ended, you had to take a eugenics class or you didn't graduate. You know, the profound power. Let me be real. America is who funded, under Harriman and a lot of other vehicles, funded Hitler. It was Thyssen. It was the the mogul of the metal manufacturers in Germany that funded Hitler. But the very first one that got Hitler going was the Harrimans. You know, so in essence, what I'm telling you is the original Nazis are Americans. The Bonn movement, which was the Nazis in America, they had rallies in Madison Square Garden. You know, the profoundness of eugenics in America before the end of World War II was profound. And isn't it interesting that all the documents that could prove even more people involved in their involvement keeps the time that we were supposed to get all those documents released keeps getting extended. And why? Because the people must still be in power. The family members, the children of them. You know, there's a lot of questions that need to be answered about eugenics, because eugenics is the predecessor to MK Ultra. Because it doesn't matter what you're doing to them. That's a lesser human. And when you mitigate a human into a percentage of value, it makes it easier to do horrible things. Just look at how easy it is for some human beings to abuse an animal, to kill an animal, to hang them on your fucking wall. Think of the depravity and the acceptance of society of just something as simple as that. That's devaluing something because you think you're superior to them and they have no value.
That's how they were able to psychologically.
Do you know science has actually proven there's goodness and badness? They did scientific studies showing that if just nothing more than yelling at this plant over here and giving praise to the plant over there. And that showed the difference, that there is the dark side, there is the goodness. So the whole premise of Star Wars is actually based on reality, because they even took the study further. They took water pitchers in other rooms than the plants, said disgusting things to this water and adulations to the other water. Would you be surprised that there were leaves that weren't complete, and the plant that got the ugly water, they didn't grow right, they didn't thrive, and the other plant that got that goodness water was 2 or 3 times the size of it. You can see it thriving on that goodness. When I grew up, I actually learned how a man is supposed to treat a woman, not by my home environment. My girlfriends quickly realized that I was there more for watching the interrelationship of their parents than I was for them. It was exciting as you can think. And then afterwards, it was so depressing when you have to go home to, leave me alone. Don't I get 5 minutes by myself before you want? And, you know, I made a mission statement that I wasn't that victim, because most people don't know this, but more than 3/4 of victims become abusers. Unless you make a mission statement to change your fucking soul, you are going to vomit that hate onto your child. And why? And think of it, a hater gets some satisfaction out of poisoning their children into continuing the legacy of hate, which is going to poison their soul. You know, because if you believe in Judgment Day or not, it's going to poison your soul. But if you believe in Judgment Day and you are perpetuating hate rather than thriving on that dialogue of learning and growing, you better hope there's no God, because you're not going to do too good. Because I make a mission statement of growing shit. And that's coming from, the thing that saved my soul, as stupid as it sounds, is our Constitution. And people want to rape it. Why is it that everybody in both parties don't fight for our civil rights? That's profound. That's a question that needs to be answered. Why is one party against all of the rights that are embedded into our Constitution? And those are questions that need to be answered. And programmed people, this is just going to blow by. It's the reason why everything I'm saying is completely programmed. But I've programmed myself to fall on the goodness side, to fall on the side of not attacking somebody. The only one time I've initiated a fight was when my sister was being raped as a 13-year-old by her gym teacher in high school. My mother told me to keep my nose out of it. My older brother told me to stay out of somebody else's business. I went and kicked the flying shit out of him. Didn't touch her because, that's something I will never do. Ask yourself, why didn't they call the cops? That's the only time I will ever is defending a woman.
Can I say something? Is that okay?
No, absolutely.
In agreement with what Mark was saying, the way that we were raised, we had really dysfunctional family life. And then, I was also, my twin sister and I were sexually abused at home by our dad at night. And then, of course, at Stanford, we know that was all bad with the torture and everything. But so where does a child learn what love is? And that was the big mystery for me, is I really didn't know how to love. And so it took time. I think it was, my whole life I would avoid people. I was afraid of people, just like Mark was saying. I was terrified of people, but I knew deep down, love is good, but why do I feel like I don't love anyone? I'm just afraid of people. So it was just probably starting in my 30s that I started to kind of look at the things, like, you hear things like people say, well, God loves you. And I used to tell people, well, if he loves me, I want him to tell me that. I don't want you to tell me. I want to hear that from his mouth. You know what I'm saying? And so, but little by little, I just started, I guess you could say, working on my relationship with God. And for an MK Ultra survivor, it's terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying. But I knew that if he could be known, that there was something I had to do to know him, and I'll never forget, I was 32 years old and somebody said, Frida, I told them my story. They said, you've never trusted God. I go, you're right. I've never trusted him. They said, you need to trust him. And I didn't know how to do that, Emma. I didn't know how to trust a God that I couldn't even see. And so what I did is I remember I went home and I got on my knees and I said, God, I'm going to give you my trust right now. You better take it before I change my mind. And so I literally went like this and I go, take it. And I threw it up like that. And then it was like that night or the next night, I had an experience where Jesus came into my bedroom and he just knelt next to my bed and he talked to me for a long time. It was like peace absolutely flooding my soul. So he's real, he's real. And I'll tell you one thing, just one more thing briefly. I mean, I'm working on a book right now, but it'll take me a long time to write it.
Yeah. I said, that's amazing.
Yeah, thank you. Something I had a conversation, with Jesus. I call him Yeshua, but most people call him Jesus. And this was in December of 2021, and he and I were talking about my sister, Claire, my twin sister. She was at Stanford. She's an amazing human being. I'll try to send you more information on her. And she was a music teacher and an artist. And I mean, she was just amazing. She had more talent than any human being I've ever known. And, the Lord was telling me, Claire is with me in heaven. I'll have to send you that conversation. It was amazing. And during that conversation, God, Abba Father, spoke up and he said, Frida, he said, I saw everything that happened to you and your twin sister at Stanford, and I have nothing but mercy for you. So I'm going to look at you, Mark, and say, our Heavenly Father loves you more than you can imagine, and he has nothing but mercy for you.
Well, thank you.
Because he saw everything that happened to us, and the way it was explained to me Okay, and this is another story. I was in my bed one night in 2013 and I heard God crying. Okay, I don't know if you've ever heard God cry before, but I couldn't believe it because I've never heard him cry before. And I go, what do I say to the creator of the universe? He's crying and I can hear him crying. What do I say to him? And I said, what would you say to your friend if your friend was crying? So I thought, well, I'd ask him if they're, and I said, Heavenly Father, I said, what's wrong? You're crying. What's wrong? And then he said the name of a friend of mine who was a drug addict and he wasn't doing well. He was living on the streets. He was crying over my friend, Richard, who was a drug addict. And he was crying because he felt so bad. So the same God that created the heavens and the earth weeps when one of his children is suffering. And when Mark and Claire and Ariadne and I were at Stanford, okay, the things happening to us, God cried when we were going through all that. He wept. And I guess if that's, if that helps you to understand, that helps us to understand that he is a God who sees, he's a God who cares. And his heart is broken over the same things that breaks our hearts. So anyways, thank you.
I'd like to say before we're done, I enjoy giving information to people and literally demanding that they go look it up. People need to go look up heroes as part of this MK Ultra thing. And one of them is my friend Gary Webb, a Pulitzer Prize award-winning journalist for the San Jose Mercury, who unfortunately killed himself.
Twice.
He shot himself in the head twice.
Oh.
Ask yourself, how did he pull the trigger on the second bullet?
That sounds like a CIA.
I was one of many informants that he got his Iran-Contra and MK-Ultra information from, that he won Pulitzer Prize awards from. But I want to end with, I've got so much more to talk about MK Ultra, but I want also, because I know the CIA is listening to this, ultimately either on your podcast or live, and it really doesn't matter, because when you're talking the truth, you're literally your story is going to go on forever. And that gives you a form of immortality. And I'm not afraid of anything. And nobody should be, because here's the thing. The CIA is old. This is an old story. The people that were a part of it are all dead. The CIA's got two opportunities to continue what they're doing and looking like chump asses. And after they created the Iraq war with absolute lies and endangered their own agents to satisfy George W. Bush's need to go and outdo his daddy, they need, and a lot of other things I'm not going to get into right now, they need to cleanse their soul. They need to just like us humans do, when you figure out you've done something wrong, it's called a makeover. Just like we teach our children, you don't walk away from your mistakes. You have to articulate what you did wrong and say what you're going to do about fixing what you did wrong. If that applies to our children, it sure in the hell should apply to our leaders. And what that gives the CIA two choices: to continue what they're doing, lying and not telling the truth of what they did to their own citizens, or they can come on our show and they can talk about the differences that they want to make and talk about the mistakes that they did make. Because the only way to cleanse your soul is to own what you did. It applies to my religion and it applies to your religion, doesn't it? There's a bad place you're going to go if you perpetuate lies that hurt souls. Doesn't matter what religion it is. Under the whole theory of religion, it's the same God. the people have different ways of talking to that God. So if there's a God, people need to acting their life according to that. That means acting on goodness. You name one time a nasty souled person that I'm not going to even name that person in your Bible or my Jewish Bible. You name anything but goodness, which was the analogy of every story in both our books. Goodness, giving people hope, clarifying mistakes, clarifying solutions. I mean, my God, listen to what Moses wrote. I'm an anal asshole because I've done a lot of reading, and I ended up coming from a dumbass kid that didn't know why every girl on earth wasn't madly in love with me to somebody that ended up figuring a little bit out that one, I'm a dumbass, and two, I'm dumber than I think. Mama Gumpa got it on me.
No, it's more like the more I read the Bible, the more I study the Bible, the more I realize what I don't know, you know. It's like, because if God is eternal,
or you don't know.
Yeah.
And really applying it to God is lessening our responsibility of applying it to the humans around us. Because it's just like that cancer counselor was telling me. This counseling is about the survivors.
Can I say something?
Yes.
I've been listening. I mean, it's hours. I'm sorry. It's hours now that been talking about. I know Mark's story. I'm sorry. And I realize not even half of the story has been told. There are, and I mean, you can't do everything now, but it is just how deep this rabbit hole is.
If you,
I mean, it didn't stop after the 13 years in SRI. It went on for years after in other.
What she's talking about is something that we were talking about earlier than when we got on. It's that scene at Hewlett Packard Mountain Campus, and the scene of Marina said it perfect. I didn't even say it. She said it was like they had remote controls of you two, and they pushed the button, and you went instant into kill state. That so devastated me that somebody could have that control over me.
I think you were little drones.
Yeah, she said we were like little drones. And it's, if people really think about the three-dimensionality of that somebody can have that much control. And here's the ugliest thing about Kaczynski. He paid the price potentially of performing exactly what his control wanted him to do. Here's the scary thing. Kaczynski killed technology people. Who's to say one technology company didn't want to hit on another technology executive? Because he was performing exactly how he was programmed at Harvard University. And why is it that the CIA called the judge that was about to try Kaczynski and tell the judge to not allow him to use MK Ultra as a defense? What the CIA did is the definition of illegal.
Yeah. And immoral. Yeah.
And Kaczynski just died. And what in the hell do you do with Ted Kaczynski? Let's say he was under their control. Does that person still belong in jail? I would say yes. But how fair is that to a child to have been programmed into that and perform exactly like they want and then put the damn person in jail?
It's totally unjust. And we know God is a God of justice. So God has an answer for all of this. And I think that's what we're doing now, is talking about these things. Is, you know, the Bible says that the secrets of men will be shouted from the rooftops. And I think we're doing our shouting right now. We're shouting the secrets.
No, it's literally, it's just something as simple as, do you remember the litigation against Area 51 when all of their employees were dying of cancers because of the burn piles? You probably don't remember that. But the attorney isn't a nice person, but the attorney that was involved had to have his office specially secured, only one person ever allowed into his office. His life was turned into a living hell to do this litigation of this highly classified thing. So there's literally almost no attorneys on this planet that one will take on the CIA. This is what's been told to me by numerous attorneys. I either have half of my lawyers in my firm that are from Stanford, or work that we do is for other firms that have lawyers that we work with that are from Stanford, or we're working for different firms that are from Stanford. And all of the attorneys literally are saying, we're too afraid to take on Stanford or the CIA. I just had Michael Moore, the definition of a great documentarian, say he's too afraid to do my show. Not that he doesn't want to do it because of the content of what it is he's afraid of taking on the CIA.
No, not everyone is afraid of the CIA.
No, not everyone's afraid of the CIA, but the problem is that the difference between doing my show and having a profound effect in humanity and doing my show to do my show is what I'm talking about. Doing my show to do my show is not going to have any effect at all. I'm only doing my show to inspire somebody like Michael Moore to do it right.
Pizza. We have pizza that's waiting out there for us.
Yeah, I know we've been going for a while. Before we close, I just want to thank you guys so much. This is amazing. I'd love to have you guys back on, maybe for a part 2, and we can talk about a little bit more. I know we just kind of scratched the surface on stuff. I'd love to hear more from Marina too, and maybe we could do this again sometime if that's okay with you guys.
Yeah, she could give you an experience of when she and I drove near Stanford Research Institute, and how all the security started running in 100 different directions because my phone got anywhere near there.
Oh yes, we have to have you guys back on.
Thank you so much, Emma. We think you're wonderful, and just thank you so much.
You don't like me telling all the little stories, do you?
Giving survivors a voice, because I mean that's so important. Most of us have just been scared our whole life, kind of like just in hiding, and not wanting to say anything. But having this opportunity is just awesome. It's just awesome. And thank you for being so sweet and kind and patient and wonderful. And everybody loves you.
Oh, same. Thank you for this is all because of you, Frida. You're the one that connected all of us and made this happen. So thank you. This is amazing that we had.
I think the pressure from the Jewish and the Christian community could, if it's done right, have a profound effect on this.
Absolutely.
I think it's the number one shame tool that I think that we could use to get a profound effect, because I can't fathom that other children are continually being abused in the same process
that we went through.
That we went through.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I really see the worldwide Jewish community coming together with the Christian community. Yael Eckstein, she's the CEO of the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews, and she's on Facebook. If you ever get a chance, maybe you can just look at some of her stuff. And I really believe that this is, what God wants. He wants the Christians and the Jews to come together and to be in harmony, and helping each other. So.
That's beautiful. Yes, if you could send me some of her stuff, I'd love to look at it. That would be wonderful. And speaking of Facebook, do you guys want to let people know, if you want, and if you have social media platforms or anywhere people want to get in touch with you or support you, where are you guys at online?
Marina's going to do all the paperwork for the name of my news show, and what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be incorporating my news show into current affairs too. So it's connecting the past to the present, because when people are still using the same tools to manipulate society, I'm going to profoundly point those things out and articulate, the clarity of what they're doing, because none of us know solutions, but we all know what the problems are. And the only way we'll start getting solutions is when we start articulating what the real problems are.
But what was your question about? Is it how to reach us, or you said something about social media, or?
Yeah, like if you guys have, if somebody's like, oh, I want to go follow them and, you know, follow what they're doing, or go see them on Twitter, Facebook, and it's okay if you don't have anywhere like that, but if you do have places
And
that people can support
also,
you.
if you can give us guidance too, on like something as simple as how to properly upload videos, how to do all these ancillary things, it would be a knowledge base that would be so profound that you're from that generation that you know so much more of technology than we do, and she's my technology expert.
She says, "Shut up! I want to answer your question."
No, absolutely. Let's plan a call sometime, and we can go over, like, I'm very simple. I don't know a ton about technology, but I'd walk you through everything I do know. I'd be happy to. But yeah,
we don't have any of this on a website or a YouTube or a nothing, because you cannot advertise something like this just randomly. So when there is something really, we will do it, but otherwise you just sound like a crazy person, conspiracy theorist, going mad on whatever platform. So we are rather keeping it to ourselves.
Gotcha.
At this moment.
Perfect. Well, whenever.
And my intent is to draw everybody to the center.
Yes.
Because in the center, politically or socially, it's where there's dialogue and there's solutions.
And children should have no political affiliation. This is a nonpartisan issue that we can all come around and join hands with.
Exactly, because it's the responsibility not just of the religious people, but of everybody to start talking to each other.
Absolutely. Yeah.
By the way, Emma, I'm on Twitter and Facebook, and my name is Frida Halliday, Halliday. So you can put my name on there.
Okay.
If you want. Yeah.
Perfect. And Mark, whenever you get your show up, Mark and Marina, we'll have you guys back on and talk about it and promote it, and we'll show people and tell them where to connect you guys with there. So I just want to thank you guys with all my heart for coming on and speaking today. I know it was a long show, a lot of information. You guys did absolutely phenomenal, and it was incredible having so many people here to help validate these stories, and not that we don't believe them already on their own, but just really beautiful seeing you guys all come together and support each other and validate and corroborate. So just thank you so much for spending time with me today.
Thank you.
Thank you for you too.
Guys, well, I'm gonna put Frida's links below. I'm gonna put my social links below. You guys, please share this episode. Please comment, go uplift these amazing humans. Get excited for Mark. He's an incredible speaker. He's extremely eloquent, as you guys can see. So get excited that he's going to have his own show that we can tune into and continue learning from him. Pray protection over them, and Ariadne as well. Please pray protection over them as they continue to speak out. And, we want them to be able to keep doing this. So keep them in your prayers, keep them in your thoughts. And you guys, thank you so much for supporting this show. God bless you. And we'll see you next time.
Emma, is it possible to send us a recording of the show?
Absolutely. Yes, of course.
Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely.
That'd be great.
All right, you guys.
No, because I think Emma, you could be one of the players in like our not our YouTube show, but the real show, where you need an ensemble of people to ask the right question in the right shot scene, and to create that right energy to have that profound effect. So it's what I learned in entertainment. It's not the information, it's how you present it. Yeah. So I think you're one of those soft presenters that you're like Marina, you come across empathetically, and you could be a good interviewer.
She is. She's very good.
Thank you so much.
No, I mean, like, for instance, walking through a park thing where, you're asking those profound questions that somebody's going to be more inclined to, in that soft environment, answer a question than sitting right across you know, with some hot lights on them. You know, that's that comfort fit, like those, you know, slippers.
Because
You and Marina.
you make people feel safe enough so
And comfortable.
we can open up to you.
Yeah.
And yeah, I could not do this with just anyone. So thank you.
Well, thank you too. That means a lot to me. Sorry, I'm gonna get all teary.
Oh, it's okay.
Well,
was always my
that
vision.
personality type is what gets people to answer questions they wouldn't be inclined to answer. So.
Well, and it always bothered me listening to podcasts, and it was like the host is so domineering, and it's like, gosh, I would be intimidated if somebody were to talk to me like people,
Soft is more powerful than forceful at times.
Yeah, especially with this stuff. Like we're talking about some hard, heavy stuff. It's already tough. You don't need somebody really aggressive, you know, and combative almost or domineering to.
Well, and you know why is because the one thing you want to do is not challenge them as if you're lying to me, but then do your research. So the next time you come back, you have some challenging things. So then you can be challenging with facts, but do it in such a way it's soft enough that they can answer the question rather than you already coming to a conclusion. That's that. I profile people everywhere I go, and I only surround myself with those types of people because I have a trust problem because of everything I've been through.
That's
So
normal. Yeah.
Understandably. And Mark, whatever
so thank you very much, and thank you too.
Thank you, Mark.
anything I can do for you guys, I'm here for you. You're so beautiful, and you know, I loved how you guys were encouraging each other and just saying those really beautiful things back and forth to uplift each other. So whatever I can do for you guys, I'm here for you, and I hope everyone listening got so much value and
thank Dale Carnegie classes for being nice to people. No, it's true. It's true. It's the reason why we're good. I don't care. I'll continue talking until the thing's on.
Thank you, Emma.
Thank you guys too. God bless you all, and we will see you next time.